welcome. I'd like to call tonight's advisory committee meeting to order at 7:30 on February 16th, 2017. So welcome, everyone. First order on the agenda is questions from the public on items not on the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move right into our article hearings this evening, our warrant hearings. So I'm going to pass it over to Victor and Julie, who will introduce Article W.
Jim?
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Eric has chosen to recuse himself from this discussion and vote. So thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So Article W is a citizen's petition brought by Judy Kelly, asking to change the number of selectmen to 5 via a special act. Now, a little background on the process. In 2009, the Attorney General interpreted state law to mean to prohibit towns from making a change in the number of selectmen other than through a charter amendment or a special act. So therefore, this article is asking for a special act. Under the article, the change would take effect at the first election occurring more than 4 months after the special act is adopted. So the first year, the town would elect 3 selectmen on staggered terms, 3, 2, and 1, and then after that, it would be, just like now, the term would be for 3 years. So I think a little history might be helpful to just put this in perspective. For the past 25 years, the town has had several citizens' petitions to increase the number of selectmen. The most extensive debate seems to have been in 1992, when the advisory committee recommended the change to 5 selectmen by a 5-4 vote. At that time, though, the government study committee recommended against the change. There were some 45 or so pages of transcript from town meeting testimony, discussion, and eventually it was defeated on a voice vote. It came again in 2004 when the proposal was to have 7 selectmen, defeated, came up again in 2005 and 2010, both times for 5 selectmen. After 2010, the question was referred to a government study committee as part of a actually quite large charge. They were looking at all sorts of things about town governance. And that committee, after looking at the issue, decided not to recommend any changes. So our sponsors tonight of Article W believe the time is right to revisit this. Put in a nutshell, because of the increased complexity of the town's budget and also the growing population, more development in town. I'd like to give you a little background of the research Julie and I had available to us. As you can imagine, with all those town meeting proceedings in the past, there's a lot of information that was historically collected. So we reviewed past transcripts of the town meetings, minutes of the government study committee, and similar materials. We've talked to, obviously we talked to the proponent, Ms. Kelly. We talked to a number of current, well, all of the current and a number of former selectmen and other people who've been involved in town government. Also in 2011, the government study committee, with the help of volunteers from the League of Women Voters, put together a chart of Hingham and most of the benchmark communities, asking a number of questions, exploring how those towns, what they thought of their selectmen, whether it's 5 or 3, what they thought the pros and cons were of having that number of selectmen. So we had those materials available to us as well. In general, and obviously we're going to get into this much more detail when the proponents make their presentation, but in general, the arguments in favor of the change, to just sort of highlight a few, thought is there'd be more diversity of opinion, broaden the representation among different groups in town or sections in town, decrease the workload of any individual selectmen, because obviously there'd be more of them. That would allow selectmen to also have a broader outreach to the community. Another point that has been raised in favor of the change is if you had 5 members on a board, you wouldn't have a quorum if only 2 were speaking, so there could be a better flow of information and exchange of ideas between colleagues on the board. A subset, obviously, wouldn't be able to communicate throughout the whole board. In general, opponents sort of fall into 2 camps in my sort of estimation. They're either those who say, no, the things have been working in Hingham, there's no reason to change. Then there are others who say, well, we don't see an immediate need for it, but maybe it's a good idea to study, and let's take some time and look at it. Some in both camps warn of both camps of the no or maybe, warn of possible unintended consequences. What would be the impact on the workload of town staff, for example, if there are 5 selectmen all making demands, or not necessarily demands, but just having different projects and ideas that they want to have the staff implement? Would there be some adverse impact? Would there be a budgetary impact? Others say, gee, would this further enhance the power of the town administrator because the selectmen are now more diluted? Would it? Is that a good or bad thing? Others might say to the contrary, that, well, 5 are better watchdogs over the town administrator. Opponents feel that there may be less of an incentive to reach consensus because there are 5 opinions, 5 out there who know that their one vote against the group perhaps won't hold things up, so maybe they're willing to be more argumentative. Some opponents point to what they feel is a significant danger of business being conducted more privately, for the, so the flip side of the idea that folks could speak, at least 2 people could speak independently outside of the public meeting. Well, some people look at that and say that's not a good thing. You don't want any public business outside of the public meeting, and it is good to have the selectmen in front of the town and publicly making their decisions and having their discussions. A couple of other things that have been raised. Would there be a sufficient number of candidates? Would the town, if dissatisfied with the board's composition, be able to overturn the board as quickly as they could now, where it's just 3 members on the board? And town has had a tradition of only 2 terms per selectman generally. Would that tradition hold, or if there are 5 members, would people sort of be forming factions and feel they have to maintain their position on the board to keep out people they disagree with? You know, these have all been things that have been raised in some of the discussions we've had. Since the 2011 study, there have actually been 3 more nearby towns which have gone to 5 after a government study committee in their particular communities and made recommendations and after examining the particulars for their community. That's Milton, Norwell, and Hanover. Back in 2011, there was already a majority of communities of our benchmark in the 5 camp, as it were. Hingham currently is one of several, and I'll be more specific in a moment, one of 3 of our benchmark communities, 16 others, with 3. So the others are Weston, West, and Westwood. They're both smaller than we are. The third in the, well, there's a third on the South Shore. It's Duxbury, which is not a benchmark community, but they are also smaller than us, than we are. And then there are 3 larger than Hingham communities in the metro area that still have 3. So that's Marshfield, Belmont, and Milford. So with that introduction, I think, Judy, would you like to present your case?
to everyone, but the secretary and any others, so that you'll have them when you come to discuss the issue. Good evening. My name's Judy Kelly. Hingham has been governed by a three-member board of selectmen from its earliest days as a farming community with a population of 2,000 to 3,000 residents. Over the years, as our town has grown, it has retained its identity as a quaint, historic New England town. However, since the turn of the century, there has been significant changes to our landscape. Where once we had open space and residential homes along Whiting Street, we now find large community developments like Linden Ponds, Derby Brook condominiums, and Whiting Place. The dilapidated shopping plaza of the 80s and the 90s on Derby Street has been revitalized and now draws shoppers from all over the South Shore and beyond. The shipyard has completely changed with a multi-purpose use of residential and commercial development. Since 2000, due to the real estate boom, many homes have changed ownership, bringing in young families with fresh, new ideas and experiences. Technology has had its impact as well. Residents use social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to discuss and stay current on all local issues. All the newspapers, like the Hingham Journal, are available online. HCAM allows us to watch town meetings from the comfort of our homes. Much has changed since the days when Hingham was a rural bedroom community. Many of the 22,000 residents feel we are long overdue for changes to our town government. They want the Board of Selectmen to expand from 3 members to 5. The reasons are varied and many. First is the comparison of the makeup of the Board of Selectmen relative to other boards and committees in town. Please look at number 1 on your handout. Notice that the Board of Health is the only other board or committee with 3 members. Every other one, from advisory committee to the garden club, have no fewer than 5 members. Yet the Board of Selectmen is responsible for a $111 million budget that has grown exponentially over the past 3 years. Please look at the increase on slide 2 and 3. Why do all of these boards and committees maintain 5 members or more? The reason is simple. More members make a broader representation, diversity of opinion, and a shared workload. The Board of Selectmen's workload is significant. Slide number 4. Not slide. One day it will be slide, not tonight. Individually, they are assigned as liaisons to 8, 9, and 10. This begs the question, how effectively and efficiently can one person manage all the various tasks that go along with participating in 8 to 10 groups? The selectmen are to be commended for the work they do. However, they are a part-time board with a full-time agenda. Adding 2 more individuals would lighten the workload and relieve stress. It may also encourage more residents to run for a position that is manageable with their lifestyle. Having 5 members would guarantee that meetings would have consistency. If 1 or 2 members were unable to attend, there would be enough members for a quorum, and the weekly meetings would be held as scheduled. Some may be under the impression that because we have a town administrator, 3 selectmen are sufficient. However, the town administrator is not an elected official, and therefore he does not represent the Hingham voters. Policies need to be established by elected selectmen and not by town employees. Expanding the board to 5 will bring about a level of representation that our town deserves. Our town's open meeting laws, which were established for the purpose of transparency, create unique constraints that apply only to a 3-member board. Presently, if 2 members want to discuss an issue outside a posted meeting, they would be in violation of the open meeting law, because any discussion between 2 members represents a quorum. Not being able to communicate outside a posted meeting limits the flow of ideas and opinions. On the other hand, a 5-member board reaches a quorum when 2 members gather. This means that it is well within the guidelines of the open meeting law for 2 members to confer. Excuse me. Only so much time can be allotted to a topic during a selectmen's meeting, so allowing for prior communication between board members would ultimately result in a more thorough and educated discussion by the board. Perhaps the most significant reason to increase the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5 members lies with the fact, that every issue is brought before the board is decided by only 2 members. With a 3-member board, every issue needs only 2 members to agree for ratification. This means that every decision in our town is limited to the mutual opinion of just 2 people. A 5-member board would require 3 individuals, only 1 more individual, to be in agreement in order for a vote to pass. This may seem like a minor change, but it could have important results by shifting the majority vote and, and producing a different outcome. Increasing the number of votes needed to confirm a decision is less constraining and ensures it is in the best interest of the town. The decision would be, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop and get some water. I apologize. Sorry. Let's see. Let me start at the beginning of that paragraph. Perhaps the most significant reason to increase the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5 members lies with the fact that every issue is brought before the board is decided by only 2 individuals. With a 3-member board, every issue needs only 2 members to agree for ratification. This means that every decision in our town is limited to the mutual opinion of just 2 people. A 5-member board would require 3 individuals, only 1 more individual to be in agreement in order to pass. This may seem like a minor change, but it could have important results by shifting the majority vote and producing a different outcome. Increasing the number of votes needed to confirm a decision is less constraining and ensures it is in the best interest of the town. The decision will be more inclusive, a more inclusive one made by broader representation of opinion. Okay, it's just acting up because I'm here. It was all fine right up until here. As a final point, Hingham would be compared to our peer towns, one with similar demographics or our benchmark towns. This is a common practice for all towns to ensure they are staying on track. Of the 17 towns on the list that are governed by selectmen, not mayors, 15 have 5-member boards of selectmen. This is worth repeating. 15 of the 17 towns with similar demographics feel their residents are better served with 5 members than with 3. The remaining 2 towns, which have 3-member boards, have half the population when compared to Hingham. In 2012, after completing a thorough analysis, the town of Norwell voted to increase their board to 5 members. The town of Milton followed suit in 2015. Hanover also increased their board after conducting a study. All 3 of these communities arrived at the same conclusion. A 5-member board of selectmen better serves the residents of the town. The time for change is now. Hingham is no longer a quaint little New England town. We have increased in size and our demands are great. There are issues involving traffic, water, fire stations, school buildings, the senior center, housing developments, and commercial development in South Hingham that will be addressed in the near future. The only way for these to be fairly and successfully resolved is to bring a greater knowledge base, more diversity of opinion, and a broader representation to the table. We hope you will support our article. I would like to add, I did call the town of Duxbury this morning just to see, and Duxbury has brought several petitions like ourselves to change their board to 5 members. So there is a contingency in Duxbury who would like to see 5 members on the board of their selectmen. Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to open it up to questions if you don't mind, Judy. So if you wouldn't mind staying there, I'm sure they'll be directed to you or whomever else would you choose to help you answer. So I'm going to ask 3, and then I'll pass it among my colleagues. So, so you mentioned and you really started your, number one, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's wonderful that you brought this up and forward. I think it's a wonderful topic to talk about and probably a very timely topic to discuss. But I have 3 questions. So you began your presentation with discussing all the advancements that Hingham has made over the last 10, 20, 30 years. Well, that was all done with 3 selectmen. So would you have thought that with 5, the town would have progressed in a different manner?
What my point was that since 2000, we have increased, the town has had major issues. Yes, they did okay they did fine. I'm not saying that they didn't, and they still do fine. I just think that I really think we need a diversity of opinion. I think we have a lot of people that have moved in here, and I think from different petitions that I've had for different other reasons, I have found that people are dissatisfied with the fact that there doesn't seem to be a diversity of opinion on the boards as we're seeing them now. And they don't really feel that the majority of people are being represented with the 3 members, and that everybody has agreed that 5 would be there. If you look at that graph that shows the amount that the budget has grown in the last 15 years, and as I understand it, when Proposition 2.5 was presented in the late 80s, I guess it was, prior to that, the Board of Selectmen was not responsible for any part of the school board budget, but at that time it was given to the Board of Selectmen to oversee that also. So their responsibilities have grown. I mean, so many changes have taken place since 2000. I moved in here in '77, and when I drive down these streets and look at, think about what it was before, we just have had so many changes. I mean, and so many decisions with the fire station. Should we get a fire station in South Hingham? What are we going to do if we develop the Bristol Brothers property and we don't have enough? It's going to take so long for the fire station to get from South Central up to the areas up there. There's just a lot of and all of this is going to affect our budget, our personal taxes, and when we try to get that through. So I just think that there's such a tremendous change that 5 would be an asset. I also feel, as I said in there, having 2 people basically make the decision for the whole town is very limiting. One more doesn't really throw us way over the edge. It's not like we were asking for 5 or 6. It's just one more that would kind of maybe break that tiebreaker type form that we have been on over the past few years.
Okay, thank you. I'll skip my second question and go to the third. So I think what separates Hingham from many of his peer communities is the commitment and depth of his volunteers. And many of the things you talked about were accomplished because of the commitment from so many people in this room for so many years. And including this board. You may know that this board ultimately, the advisory committee, is arguably, one of the very many strengths of the community, is that it provides a very good balance to the selectmen. I mean, ultimately, we're the ones that present the budget. We're the ones that present it to the town for their consideration. The selectmen have input, but ultimately, we're the ones who govern that. So in terms of the growth of the budget, you've got a strong bench of 15 independent appointed members of the community that oversee that. And I don't think every other community has this. So I'm wondering, is there a concern with 5 selectmen that the strength of the volunteer corps in Hingham and the depth that we help serve and help make many of those decisions you mentioned would be diluted because of other objectives that 5 selectmen would then have?
I will come back to you within a month for an answer for that. But I cannot believe that the towns of Norwell, Milton, Hanover do not also have a strong system of volunteerism. I would be very much surprised to find otherwise. I don't know if anybody can tell me one way or the other, but I will come back to you with that answer.
Thank you.
And I do feel that, and at one point, I know Victor just said, at one point you were 5 members?
Of the advisory
pick that
committee?
up?
It was 9 members, so it was a 5-4 vote in '92.
In '92. And how come you went to 15 members?
Well, Tom Carey may know the answer to that. Is Tom still here? I believe, but this is a guess, that there was a government study committee around that time frame when the executive secretary came in, and I'm guessing that the size of the advisory committee also was changed at that time, but I actually don't remember.
Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm saying if it's important for the advisory committee to go from 9 members to 15 members, why, and that was back in 1992, why is it not as important for the town selectmen to go from 3 members to 5 members? Not a big change, but it could have significant difference. It was your group was considered important enough to increase, and we think it's important enough to increase this board of
Actually,
selectmen.
just a point of information, the advisory committee was 15 in '87, so.
Okay,
It may have
then
just been the members present for that vote.
It could be.
Oh.
Could be.
So I don't believe it increased over that
Okay.
time.
All right.
But thank you. I'm happy to open up to the rest of my colleagues here. Tom?
Sure, I have 2 questions. Do you believe the issues will become more complex and time-consuming to deal with in the future? Do you see-
The
do you
last
see-
part was in the future, is that what you said?
Yeah.
I do. I definitely, I think they've become more complex than before 2000. Would you not agree with that? Some of the 40B issues and the fire stations, what are we going to do with 3 fire stations that are not big enough for the engines that are now being developed and so on? It just seems that there are a number of major issues that we're looking at. The school systems, we got we fixed South, we fixed middle school, but we still have Plymouth River and we still have Foster School. So it just goes on and on there. I just think 2 people making the decision for everything that goes on in town, it would be more advantageous for one more person to be. If you have 5 people, you wouldn't see the consistency of the same people grouping together. I think you'd see more of a shift. I'm hoping you would see more of a shift.
My second question is, as a follow-up to discussion at Board of Selectmen about their role as liaisons. It's been mentioned in the past, not only 2 nights ago, that for a Board of Selectmen member to attend a board meeting sometimes affects the process and discussion of the board in some kind of a negative fashion. But I also have heard that it's mentioned that when a leader shows up, it's a means of support and an opportunity to connect with that board to government process. Could you comment on that?
From what I hear, Paul Gannon says he goes to significant number of the board, the liaison meetings, and he said he always gathers information, thoughts, different point of view from them. I think when you just go rarely, you're not there with any kind of consistency, it's less likely that that board would consider you as part of their group, and sort of you would mesh and mingle and become part of their, where they, that's my thought on it. From what I hear from Paul Gannon, he finds that the people are very receptive to his being there, and he has gained major insight from it.
So they find it as a means of support.
Right. An area to communicate.
Those are all the questions I have right now.
Thank you, Tom. Bob?
Yes, thanks, Judy, for your presentation. I have 2 questions also. The first one is on mechanics. On the first election that's contemplated, there'd be 3 selectmen that would be elected.
Right.
And each voter would then vote for 3 selectmen?
No, they would vote, yes, they would vote for 3 selectmen, and then the person that had gotten the most votes would be elected for 3 years. The person that came in second would get 2 years, and the third one. This is the way that both Norwell and Milton are doing.
Is there a tiebreaker?
Tiebreaker?
If somebody gets the same number of votes?
Well, we could say that in our election that's going to come up in 2007. We've got 3 people running. What if 2 people get the same,
I suppose there'd be a runoff, but...
So, I mean, whatever situation basically you can set forward can also happen with 3 people. I mean, I've no...
Just sticking with the mechanics, then the next year, I guess the way I look at it mathematically, there'd be 2 selectmen that would be elected.
Mm-hmm.
And each voter would vote for the 2 candidates of their choice. Does the voting method need to be part of this act, or is that covered elsewhere?
No, I think that's something that is worked out. I mean, it isn't...
Do you know that, Victor?
I don't know for sure, Bob. I mean, my reaction is that it probably would have to be part of the act if you're not able to modify the number of selectmen other than through a special act. So I don't know for sure, but I would be surprised if it weren't the case.
So if it does have to be part of the act, does that mean this article would have to be amended?
Well, what the recommendation doesn't have to. Well, I'm sorry. What do you mean?
To include what you're saying you could cover that in the recommendation?
In terms of, well, the article does include the voting process, right? Yeah, it's section 2 of the article.
Process for the first year, and then thereafter, as terms of selectmen expire.
But it doesn't say how many votes each voter gets, which was and maybe there's an answer to that question elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd ask town council, but I would expect if 3 people were running for 3 separate offices, you'd get 3 votes, would be.
And my second question, moving on from mechanics, relates to, wouldn't it be beneficial to have a government study committee address this for many of the reasons that you've suggested, that there could be public hearings, there could be a diverse input of opinions from different people that ultimately would reach a conclusion based on a broader base of expression of what the public thinks?
We have looked at the fact that Norwell did a study, and they decided 5 was the answer. Hanover did a study, and they decided that 5 was the answer. Milton had a study, and it was decided that 5 was the best way to go.
Well, why shouldn't Hingham have a study?
Because the people really want this done, and I think a voice vote at town meeting will ensure that the will of the people prevail.
Kristen?
This is probably more a question for Victor, because I did have a question about the study, because in your notes, you indicate that after the 2010 vote, the matter was referred to a government study committee, which recommended no change.
They did.
So I just want to understand are we talking about a different type of study, and why was no change recommended then?
Well, I don't know, Julie, you've spent a lot of time with the minutes.
They, in the minutes, they actually present the study results. And then I have heard anecdotally that a vote was taken, but it's actually not in the minutes for the government study committee. I'm not sure, but I went through every meeting and it's not in the minutes, so I don't know if anyone can speak to the mechanics of, but basically the gist is that they decided that they would not proceed at that time with recommending a change from the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, and that they had other issues that they wanted to tackle otherwise.
We have someone in the audience who was on the government study committee? So, Ed?
The government study of 2010 dealt with a different situation than.
I'm sorry, would you mind? We're being televised. I apologize. Thank you.
Edna English, 36 Gardner Street. That was an excellent summary, by the way, Victor.
Oh,
Appreciate that,
thanks.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The 2010 Government Study Committee dealt with very different circumstances than what we have today. And we were content, as I have always been. I'm a convert, by the way, Judy, and as has convinced me that a move to 5 is the appropriate move right now. And the reason I feel that way, there are many reasons I feel that way, but it is different now after the passage of the special act that strengthened the role of the town administrator to the degree that it did, and changed the role of the selectmen as well as changing the role of the town administrator. I think that we have a different situation now than we had before, in that I think now, for lots of reasons, but the thumbnail is that I think 5 selectmen would provide better oversight over the many responsibilities that they have now delegated to the town administrator. I mean, it's an entirely different set of circumstances than we had before. So that's the reason why the 2010 Government Study Committee thought, as I always have, that 3 was the right number. I've changed my opinion on that now. So you can't keep doing the same thing all the time.
Dan? Dan?
Yes, first a comment and then second a question. I was liaison to the town administrator, bylaw change, and one of the things that I know was considered by that group at the time was the fact that for the first time we have 3 selectmen who all have full-time jobs. In the past, we've had the opportunity to have selectmen, some of whom were retired, or some of whom didn't work full-time, and so they were able to devote a significant amount of their personal time without impinging upon other commitments that they had as individuals or in running their own businesses. But the question I have is more towards not the change in the size of our government or the size of our budget. A lot of that is a function of inflation, but more a change in the scope of the role. I was surprised to see this Board of Selectmen liaison assignments and the number of assignments that each of them have. Have you seen a change in your analysis of how that commitment has changed over time? Has it been a change in terms of the number of assignments or the level of involvement that any of the board members can have in any of these activities?
I really don't have the answer to that. And I would have to look back and research over. I was more concerned with what we are at present. And as you said, all 3 of our selectmen do have full-time jobs. So having 5 would give them the opportunity to have less stress, be able to reach out to more communities, to more people in the community, and to get a better overview of what people want.
I have one.
Yes, Lucy.
I'm not sure who to address this to, but given that we've had 3 selectmen for many years, and we don't usually have more than 2 or 3 running for selectmen, what if we had the election the year after this is passed and we only had 2 candidates?
Well, I look at all those other communities. I look at Hanover, Norwell, Situate, Cohasset, Hull, which is much, not compared to us, and they don't seem to be having a problem with that. So we have 22,000 residents, and to think that we wouldn't be able to find people that would be willing to step up, and I think actually people would probably be more willing to step up, knowing that there was more of a spread of the workload than there is at the present time.
And one follow-up.
Yes.
This one is probably for Victor or Julie. This is a simple majority vote, correct?
For this, yes.
Jim?
How long does it take for the special act to pass, go through the state level? Would it be ready for polling papers for next year's election?
You'd have to get the legislature to act. I mean, you can't make them act.
No, I know, so are we looking at something that should be
The
ready
Town
by next?
Administrative Bylaw Act was voted last year at town meeting, and it was enacted by September.
But that was considered unusually
That was
fast.
unusually fast, yes. Yeah.
But I believe that
more
in your
complicated.
proposal, you mentioned that at least 4 months must pass
There's something
between
in there that
acceptance
has to
and
be go
the election,
forward on.
right?
I mean,
So-
we would have plenty of time before the 2018. And I would like to comment, I know that the Board of Selectmen were concerned with the additional 2 people and what kind of a change it would make in the workload of the staff there. But whatever they're doing, they can talk to 2 people now instead of just talking to each one individually. I don't, and I may be wrong, but I just can't picture that it would make such a substantial change in the workload that it couldn't be handled by the current staff.
If I could make one more comment. I mean, I see this as, even though it's a town government, you hear the Board of Selectmen and others treat it as a business. It's a $111 million budgeted business. So if I have a business that's making $2 or $3 million a year, I have a certain level of executives and hierarchy of employment. When it becomes larger and it goes public, it's making a certain amount of money, I expect that there's more people involved. There's a board of trustees, there's more people looking at items, making decisions or debating the decisions to be made before they're actually enacted. This town, as Edna has said and others have said, this town has grown. In just the last, I've been here since 2005, it's grown substantially. The problems might be similar, but they're more complicated in terms of what they are. I'm just looking at this liaison assignments, and I'm wondering who decides which selectmen have which, because if the 2 of the 3 decide that they have a lot in common and have a similar agenda, looking at this, you have 2 selectmen who have the majority of more important, I don't want to say one committee is more important, but you have one that's handling fire and police, the more necessities of the town, as well as the other, and the third one is left out. They pretty much rule what goes on in this town, especially if one selectman, for whatever reason, happens to be absent, has to be absent, they can make their decisions and there's no dissenting opinion, there's no debate. The town has grown, and as Edna said, has changed, and the additional responsibilities of the town manager and the selectman now having a full-time job and trying to run a $111 million business at the same time, I just don't see how it's functioning in its best capacity for the townspeople. I see it only an additional 2 people on the board gives a better diversity or response of the public. Just like, I feel privileged. I'm with 15 people here who come from very different backgrounds. Their perception of things and their input is very different, so it helps me think from a different perspective than my own, as well as hopefully what I have to say might help you see something different. Whereas you have a Board of Selectmen of 3 that 2 have come from the same perspective, there isn't the outside opinion that really matters. And as Ms. Kelly has said, the townspeople, I don't want to see another study. We've had plenty of studies. I think if you just went to town meeting and you had a substantial portion of the population, or better yet, an election, and you put it on the ballot of, what do you think? Do you think we should have 5 as opposed to 3? I think you'll really hear from the public, and that's the decision. It doesn't really need to be studied anymore. I think enough studies, we like to study things in this town a lot, but I think enough study has been done for government. You know, I think it's time to just make a decision and go forward.
Well, it wouldn't be on the ballot, of course, it would be a
Right.
town meeting, so it would be decided by the folks that attend town meeting. Yes, Linda?
To answer Jim's.
I'm sorry, I'm
I
sorry.
have information about your first question, Jim, about the time delay between the town meeting vote in Norwell and Hanover and Milton were each 1 year. So they had a vote 1 year, and then the next year they had the election.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so if the act is put to the legislature, it's passed in time so that people who needed to pull papers for the 2018 election would have enough time to do that and then campaign, or would it be done? you know?
That's what those 3 towns were able to accomplish.
Okay.
And again, they've built into the article that at least 4 months there must be a 4-month
Right.
gap between the time it's accepted and the election, which would provide plenty of time for people to pull papers and
Okay.
have an
And
election.
the concern about not having enough people to run, this year we have 3 people running for 1 spot. But it is, so there are people out there, and I think that people would be more friendly, more open to running if they, had this broader representation there. And I think if you looked at your own board and thought, well, let's cut it in half, you do a lot of constructive work, and you can see that there's the ideas are tossed around and a conclusion has come to that way. It would be like if your own board was reduced significantly. Would you be as effective as you are now?
Linda?
Okay, Victor, I probably think this is a question for you, but in your questioning of Board of Selectmen, both the current ones, and I would say the last few years, because they're the ones that are dealing with this increased workload due to the growth. So not let's say 10 years ago, but our current Board of Selectmen and recent past Board of Selectmen, did they feel that the increased workload was too much? Was there a general feeling that, yes, this is a...
Of the people I spoke with, and I'll let Julie comment if folks she spoke with feel differently, I'd say most of them felt that the workload was manageable and did not see a problem that called for a change. That was not a unanimous view, but...
Right. No, I'm
most.
just trying to get a consensus of, again, we're saying, the town has grown so much over the years, so the selectmen that had to deal with this growth would know and understand the demands on them, and if they felt they were, overwhelmed or overworked, or, it was just too much.
I heard on a number of occasions, what's broken that needs to go to 5?
What's broken?
In other words,
If it's not broken?
if it's not broken, why make a change?
Okay.
So what is the reason to go to 5?
But you didn't get the impression that they were, the workload was just too much.
And I have heard that from at least one.
And that question was asked me at the Selectmen's meeting Tuesday night, and my answer to that was, we set this out about a month ago, and about 3 weeks ago, a young man who's been in town about 10 years, he probably, I don't know how, he's in his late 30s, young compared to me. And he came to me and he said, I moved in here 10 years ago, and I have been watching what's going on, and I keep saying, why are they doing that? What's the logic of this? Why is this taking place, and the rest of it? So he came forward and he's going to do a Facebook page for us because he feels that strongly that something is broken. And that's just one individual. I mean, there are other people. When I went out getting signatures and petitions for various things in the past couple of years, and I have heard so many people that just say, there's something going on there. It's just not working the way it should. And so that's why everyone has been talking about going to 5 people, just so that it would give that more diversity, a broader representation. Maybe there'd be more people that would be listening to the people, not just, they'd be going out, reaching out, having the time to reach out. Because basically, you've got that, you've got your meetings every week, you've got all the issues that are coming with the developments that are taking place. Look at the dog issue has been going on for months, and so on and so forth. And so that's they may say they can handle it, and they have been handling it, but would it not be easier to share some of that workload so that they can maybe have a life in the process? So.
Right.
I spoke with other.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, go
I
ahead,
spoke with
Julie.
other
Thank
former
you.
selectmen, so I just wanted to jump in that I spoke with 5 former selectmen, and of that, 3 were in favor of keeping 3, and 2 were in favor of going to 5. So the ones who were in favor of keeping it the same way felt, basically said the same arguments that Victor said earlier, but basically they felt like we just made this change for the town administrator bylaw, that we need to spend more time living into that change for that bylaw, and that they felt like there was greater transparency with a board of 3 rather than 5, and that a board of 5 would create factions.
I'm curious, the former selectmen, current selectmen certainly would have close-up views, but I wondered, did you have a chance to talk to any former town administrators or town managers, either former here in Hingham or elsewhere? Because they are some of the professionals that kind of look at it from the other side. I'd be curious if we got any opinions from those type of people.
We solicited opinions from staff here and did not get a reply, and I didn't push it. Ted did speak before the Government Study Committee in 2010 or 11 and was against a change at that point, as was Bruce Rebuffo. They spoke at the same meeting. We have not spoken to anyone outside the town, which may be one reason to do a study to get a sense for how, people say, hey, it's great. Well, who was talked to in 2011 study? Is it great, especially for the towns that made the change more recently? Are they happy? What have they seen as the downsides now that they've made the changes? We have not done any of that. We had 3 weeks basically.
Dave, excuse me, just Dave.
Sorry, Victor, just to follow up, is it possible for you to characterize or summarize Ted's testimony in that government study? Do you have any idea what his
Do you have the minutes?
top line objection was?
I have a quote from what he said at the meeting, which was, he said he did not have time to deal with 5 because his job is to work with bringing the board to consensus. That's the quote that's in the minutes.
Can I ask one more follow-up? Sure. And maybe you just answered this, Victor, but I was curious, when you, in your comment calling out the anticipated or worried about unintended consequences, in any of the towns that have come to this decision in the last couple of years, did you just say that you have yet to be able to get feedback on whether those have come to fruition?
We have not done any discussion with any of the outside other towns. So I don't know whether.
So the unintended consequences concerns by opponents was a, do you have any?
A general warning as to if we want to make such a major change to the town's government, fundamental government approach, we'd better think about it carefully and make sure that it's the right fit for Hingham. And that would include seeing how it's worked elsewhere, but then seeing whether that fits Hingham's circumstances, whatever those may be. Right.
So then in those unintended consequences, they weren't necessarily looking at particular situations where those unintended consequences necessarily appeared. It wasn't empirical?
No, there was no, I heard anecdotal comments that certain towns, people have been at each other's throats, or they think that there's been excessive factionalism. The basis of those comments, whether, could just be gossip, or, I have no idea.
Thanks.
And the League of Women Voters did a pretty in-depth study and spoke to folks at different communities, right, Julie?
Yes, back in 2011, some volunteers did speak to towns, and it's interesting because it depends on, who you would call, who'd reach on the phone. So you call the Board of Selectmen and you want to ask, you call and you speak with the chair. So the chair is going to is one person who has one opinion and how things have been going. But you could talk to other people and get different opinions. So it's I guess you could say it's a bigger project if you really want to dig down and see how things have been going over the years for those other towns. Because you're going to get a variety of opinions, just like you have a variety of opinions right now. So.
Jim, you wanted to make another comment?
Yeah, just curious. First, just Kelly, any of the towns, or maybe Victor or Julie, Kansas, if any of the towns who have changed to a higher number, have they reduced? Have they come back and changed back to a lesser number? Or have they gone up and just, whether good or bad, they're staying at the number of selectmen they have?
To my knowledge, no one has changed. They seem to be.
They moved up instead, they didn't revert back to an older form.
No one has reverted back. Some of the towns like Concord have been there so long. I called because I thought they were a new one, and they said, oh, I don't know, we've been a town forever with 5 selectmen. And to go with the comment that was made, where Ted said he didn't have the, am I correct that I heard correctly, that Ted said he did not have the time to work with 5 members?
No, well, he said, I think it was that he currently with a board of 3, there's work to just bring the board of 3 to consensus. So the thought of bringing 5 people to consensus seemed.
But he can now work with 2 at a time because he won't be violating the.
Yeah, and I just have a sentence from the minutes,
And my other thought is
context.
that 15 of the benchmark towns that do have 5 members, their town administrator seems to be working with 5 and surviving.
Which leads to my next
Jim,
comment.
can I answer,
Yes, go right ahead.
answer your other question? I'm not aware of any town going back to 3 other than Hingham, actually. I understand, based on one of the earlier transcripts, maybe in 2005 or 2010, so if that information was accurate, Hingham had 5 at one point in the 1800s because South Hingham Hingham didn't like South Hingham, so they needed 5 to represent the different interests. And then at some point after the water company was set up and the big dispute over the water company died down, I guess they decided they were happy enough with each other, they went back to 3. And then I did speak to someone in Canton where they went to 5 a number of years ago. And I asked, how's it going, and any thought of going back to 3? And he said, well, you really can't go back to 3 once you're at 5. I didn't press him on that, but I mean, there may be something to that. You've now made an institutional change. It's not probably easy to go back.
So my thought is, we're a town that likes the numbers to support what we do. The school committee, other committees use the benchmark towns constantly as an example of where Hingham stands. In certain circumstances, we like to be in the middle, that we're not the highest tax-based town, we're not the lowest, we're right in the middle. Same with spending on school and per student. And here we are with other.
Lowest.
Yeah. Here we are with another set of numbers where we like to, where do we compare to towns that are compatible to us? And we're nowhere near with the majority of these towns. I mean, most of these towns are at 5, and only 2 others are at 3. And a lot of these towns, I would say, are as successful and as prosperous and as a good a place to live as Hingham is. And they're working with 5. Now, the thing with Ted, not being able to work with 5 and can only work with 3, I can speak that I'm not a big, things have changed, and his role has changed dynamically, and I need to know that the Board of Selectmen still represent the town and making the town's what's in the best interest of the townspeople and not the other way around. The town manager isn't making or leading the selectmen to what he thinks is in the best interest of the town. Having 5, I think, gives you, again, a greater representation, hopefully, of who the town is, as opposed to 3.
Anyone else have a question for Judy? And I'm happy to open it up to the audience as well.
something. I am a former selectman, and.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I know.
The way it works, when people confronted with issues of any kind, when you're in a board of 3 people, the way it used to be. Now, I come from the previous time when people were collegial, and although sometimes there were disagreements, we would work them out individually and collegially among people who respected each other's opinions. And so we arrived at conclusions through discussing and deliberating among ourselves. You cannot do that anymore because 2 people, one selectman can't speak to another selectman without violating the open meeting law. So that means that they cannot talk among themselves. So everything, therefore, has to be funneled and channeled through the town administrator, who controls all the information they have and then really determines the outcome, in most cases, of the whatever the issue is. So I think that is not the best way to do business. Because these people can't talk among themselves. So that's a very compelling reason, in my opinion, and the reason why I have changed my opinion. I always felt 3 was the best number, and it was, until the implementation of the open meeting law has become the way it has become. There are other things. With the strengthening of the role of the town administrator, we now have the town administrator also the chief financial officer of the town, who makes all financial decisions. And the selectmen are apart from that. So while they have to sign the warrant and agree to all the expenditures above a certain amount of money, he's the chief procurement officer. At one time I was. It simply is different. So what we have done is we've changed the way we govern we self-govern. If we are interested to continue self-government, then I believe that it is a better form of government to have more oversight. That would be 5 selectmen overseeing the different facets of the job. Now, to be sure, they're policy-making people. However, they are accountable. They're the only elected people, so they are accountable to the voters. So if you had more selectmen, you would have a greater ability to oversee the expenditures, the people who are doing DPW, for example, or whatever it might be. Recently, a couple of years ago, out of that same government study committee was the move to make the town treasurer subordinate to the appointed subordinate to the town administrator. Prior to that, we had checks and balances. One department just helped the other department, so that there was separation of powers. The way our town was originally decided it's supposed to be governed. But we changed that, and we have centralized and concentrated to such a degree the decision-making within the town that it's not what it used to be. I'm not sure that we've made it better. We've probably made it more efficient, but I'm not sure we've made it better from the point of good government, good governance. So I think that increasing the number to 5 is a reasonable thing to do, considering the change in the way we self-govern. So that's how come I have come to believe that 5 is a better number than 3. And of course, the town will decide ultimately.
And thank you very much. Can I ask a follow-up question? I love your input on something. So, I don't have a vote as a chair unless there's a tie. So, as I've thought about this article, I've thought about the communication issues. And today, any business done among the selectmen have to be done in open meeting. They can't discuss it. But then as I think about 5, I think about the scenario where 2 of them talk about an issue, but then neither of them can talk to any other selectman about that issue, because then that would be serial communication, which is against open meeting law.
Chairman of the Board of, just as you, if you were chairman of the Board of Selectmen, you could talk to Donna,
Yes.
and then you could talk to Lucy, and you could talk to Linda individually.
About that same
And you
item?
could say, yeah, without,
Isn't that serial communication, though?
no, because 2 people can talk. You could say to them, that's what goes on now. The town administrator talks to these people individually. But the chairman, the elected chairman, elected by the voters, would then be able to say to the various members of the 5 members individually, he could say, look, I think that, I don't know,
But
they shouldn't build a new fire
That- I
station
don't
or
know if
something.
that's what
I
And
guess I'd
He could
I don't
deal with
believe
each
so.
individual, individually, they would make up their own minds, they
Mm-hmm.
would never vote until they got to the full meeting, and then, having made up their own mind, but the chairman, having given the information that he had, they would then make up their own minds and vote accordingly. It wouldn't, they would never be able to vote or deliberate,
think
but
that
he
then-
would be able to convey information.
I think there'd be a question about that. And
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think
the
that's
difference with the
allowed.
town administrator talking, the town administrator's not, not one of the 3.
I'm sorry.
So let's assume that's true. I'm not clear on that, we'll have to check, but let's assume that's true. Isn't there a concern then that business is being done in town, decisions are being made in private instead of in public? I mean, the vote may occur in public, but then you would have, in your example, an issue where deliberation is being done in private. Isn't that a concern?
Deliberation would be done in public.
Well, the vote would be done in
The-
public.
But the transfer of information could be done between the chairman and the other.
Can't the same thing happen
member.
now with the town
I don't think
administrators?
that that's-
Just being the messenger and conveying?
Yeah.
They're not, well, the town administrator's not supposed to relay an opinion of one selectman on an item, on an issue, to another selectman.
Because that's how committees work now. The most recent committee that I was on, the chairman would inform the members of whatever it was that they needed to know, happened to be about the electronic voting. And we never said to him, I think we should do X, Y, or Z. He gave us the information, and then we came to the meeting and we made our votes. So the actual deliberation took place in public, but the conveying of data, information, charts, whatever, would be done through the chairman, which to me feels better than having it done by an appointed person, simply because you, if you were the chairman, would represent me as a voter. So it feels better to me to do it that way. It feels more the way we would be self-governing. So, and by the way, I was the first person to hire Charlie Cristello, taught him everything he knows. And he was wonderful. I mean, I was the last of the do-it-yourself selectmen, and Charlie was wonderful. He did a fabulous job for us, and of course, the rest is history. But the nature of the job has evolved. And along with the position of the town administrator evolving, I think, in my opinion anyway, it's okay for the Board of Selectmen to evolve to another form too. But anyway, you folks have your decision to make, and the town's going to make the final decision. That's just my input.
Thank you very much. Yes, Bob?
Jim, I believe your observation and what Victor expressed is correct, that you can't have subsets of a governing board exchanging, debating information in less than quorum groups without violating the open meeting law. And the Boston City Council was subject to an injunction because they were doing just that. Subsets, less than a quorum of the members would meet, and then there'd be a different subset overlapping, and it becomes a real problem with transparency.
Any other questions for Judy?
I have a comment. I happened to attend one of the selectmen's meetings, I think it was back in the fall there, Paul Gannon had gone to a meeting of Bear Cove, it was
Bear Cove?
Bear Cove, yes. And in there, these residents had expressed their concern about the fact that the Avalon apartment complex that's going up at Shipyard. And there is, they had expressed to him that there's a small auto building there that they had heard that Avalon was looking to purchase in the next few months, next year. And they had said to him at this meeting that they did not want to have any more than the allotted number of units that they had agreed upon with Avalon on the, I think 192 is it? Is that the, something, it changed. But the end result is Paul came to the selectmen's meeting, and because he couldn't talk to anyone prior to that, he brought it up at the meeting. And both Paul Healy and Mary Power, it came like out of the blue to them, and they had a document in front of them which they were supposed to sign that was an agreement to, an agreement with Avalon. And Paul was trying to get them to add the language that said, this is the maximum number of units that will be allowed in this development. And because Paul Healy and Mary had no prior knowledge of this fact, because they couldn't discuss it prior to the meeting, they went ahead and voted. They said they were going to go ahead and vote that document as it was written. And I think that maybe if they had had an opportunity to realize how much the residents of that section of town really were against the ability to leave the door open so Avalon could come back in and increase it next year, maybe they would have done otherwise.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
That neighborhood was Bradley Woods. That was my neighborhood. That's where the shadow of that new building will fall. So just want to let you know that.
Any other folks from advisory? And I'll open it to the public in a moment. Anyone else from advisory have a question? No, Mr. Reardon, yes.
Yes, Bill Reardon, 9 Steamboat Lane. I stand here because you guys are taking this up tonight. Are you voting on this evening?
We're not voting on it this
Okay, I don't
evening.
know whether any of you had an opportunity to review the discussion of this Tuesday night at the Selectmen's meeting. My wife came and knew that it was going to be taken up that night. She served with Edna for a period of time. She served as a selectman for 9 years and has very strong feelings about this article and articulated them well that evening to the selectmen. And I really urge you, before you vote, to hear that. I will just give you a mini snapshot of that and then step down. I was here tonight to see how the selectmen voted on Articles R and T and S this evening, which they did, and you'll hear about that. So there are different views on this. I think Mrs. Reardon's view is one of the most important things that 3 causes to happen in this town is that there is sort of no place to hide. You cannot simply endorse one group of voters. You can't be a kind of one-issue selectman. There's only 3 of you. It's going to be 1 and 1, and then there's going to be a tiebreaker. That demands that our selectmen represent the whole town, not just a portion of the town, not just the subsector that was most important in electing them. They have to view the whole town. It was interesting, Selectman Healy this evening actually referred to her comment as they were making the decision on the leash situation in Bear Cove Park, which we all spent a great deal of time on Tuesday talking about. So that's one perspective. The other is a little bit of this serial question, and there's some kind of decision to be made about that. There is a sense that that can happen, and if so, you may have a decision before you come to decide, and that's absolutely, in violation of the notion of an open meeting law. Her final point, and again, I really urge you to see it, was this would be a very major change in how this town, which has always, it's looked to other comparator towns for sure, particularly on the financial end, because we're, size similar to Wellesley and some of the other towns that we compare ourselves to. But we govern differently than them. We have historically, it's been a very good model for the town. We've considered this action a number of times before. We have not done it. It's not to say that things may not have changed. Other towns have made this decision. What was the basis for their change? How has it worked out? But it's such a major change in how we operate. Edna spoke to, if 5 would allow selectmen more time to participate and perhaps have interaction with committees. True, but I, having served on 3 committees in this town, will tell you that when a selectman is in the room, it's a different beast. There is a different feeling in the room. There's a different sense of ownership. When the committee is there, and we're populated with incredibly good people across this town, they do a very good job. They should be allowed to do their job and then report up to the selectmen and to you, the advisory committee, with their recommendations. If you start getting too much, what's an executive's job? So all of that, the thrust of this is, if we do this, if we're going to consider this, we should only do it after a very serious, kind of independent, very dispassionate, objective study, the kind that, for example, the League of Women Voters does, which is on a totally nonpartisan basis. They take an issue, they'll look at it for a year. This is so major to the way we govern in this town. I would not like to see, and I know Mrs. Reardon would not like to see this arise as an article and be voted like that without kind of full ramifications. So apologies for I tried to reach her, but she couldn't get here in time for.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Again, we will not be voting this evening. We'll be voting it over the next 2 weeks, and we'll certainly let you know specifically what that night will be. It may be a little bit in flux, but it will be over the next, it will be the week of, it will be most likely either February 28th or March 2nd. We'll be voting, but we'll certainly let you know the next day or two, the specific day.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yes, of course.
Bill's comment kind of got me curious. Can someone, and maybe it's Mrs. English or anyone, speak to what is the expectation of the liaison role for a selectman? In other words, how do the selectmen see their liaison role? I mean, I'm familiar with how advisory considers their role as a liaison, but I'm just curious how you would characterize it, to Bill's point about being in the room versus not being in the room, being at 1 meeting out of 30 or being at 30 meetings out of 30.
I'm not sure I understand what
Are you referring to the fact that he said that people become uncomfortable when a selectman is in there? Is that what your reference was to?
No, not necessarily. I guess my question would be, when you're in your role as a selectman, I'll ask you just directly, when you were a selectman and you were a liaison, I assume, to some subset of the town committees, how did you view what were your responsibilities as a liaison to those committees, as you saw it?
I would meet with whether it was the harbor master or the chief of police or whoever it was. And see, the selectmen, when I was a selectman actually performed an operating role. And in those days, if you were a selectman, it was just about a full-time job. I mean, now we have, which is, I think, a big difference, too. The selectmen now have full-time other occupations, but previously, selectmen were frequently retired people, or, in my case, I made the time. I was not retired, but I made the time. And it was nearly a full-time job. You're always in contact with counsel for the town. And there was one main counsel for the town, too. There were maybe 1 or 2 others, but now we have a plethora of various lawyers, so we don't have the same solid person who would always give you legal advice when you needed it. So that's a difference. But and just think of yourselves now, when you're on a subcommittee, you talk to your subcommittee member and you share information back and forth. You each make independent decisions, but you want to talk to one another. Supposing Victor and Julie never could talk to each other unless they were here at a full meeting and there was never time enough to fully explore the issues. Imagine if you're a selectman, you could never do that. Every thought that you had would have to be in public at a posted meeting. You'd never be able to, I mean, it seems to me to suffocate the ability to have free discussion of all the issues. The only channel of information comes through the appointed town administrator. It's not you with your subcommittee members deciding how you're going to present an issue. You can't do that. I mean, I don't know how they do it now. I really don't. And it would be very, very difficult, I think, to make a good decision. I mean, just apply it to yourselves and you can see the difficulty. So that's why I think 5 would help the problem. If not solve the problem, at least it would help it.
Thanks.
Dave,
Does that any kind of an answer? Am I being clear?
Yeah.
Dave, the other night, the Board of Selectmen meeting, Mary Power speaks a little bit to this question, so if you have a chance to go through it, but she mentions that the Board of Selectmen, they're in charge of setting policy goals, and that they, she says that they're good at having volunteers and the Board of Selectmen kind of staying in their own lane and not getting too involved in the day-to-day workings of committees unless a problem is raised. I mean, obviously they're overseeing, but not going to every committee meeting or being that involved. And she, I know Judy, you had a back and forth with Mary a little bit about that at the meeting, but Mary felt that that maybe being more involved as a liaison was changing the nature of the scope of the Board of Selectmen job. So I think there might be a difference.
I think I may,
Mary Powers is our liaison. I've yet this year to see her in the audience.
well, I communicate with her as the
Right.
chair.
Maybe we have something to say to her, or she has something to say to all of us. That's the purpose. I go to a liaison meeting for whatever committee I'm on. I don't talk to just the chair of the committee. I'm there sitting with whatever members are there and listening to what they have to say, and maybe add some of the information we have to help them make a better decision or whatever decisions they're making. It's a back and forth communication with everyone. It's open and transparent, where, if Mary's just talking to you, it's not open and transparent to the other 14 of us.
Well, I'm happy to raise any questions or issues you have with
Okay.
Mary, and then ask her. I want to wrap this up quickly, because we've got a lot of other business to do tonight. I do not want you here past till 12:20 like you were on Tuesday. You'll lynch me. I'll be impeached. Dan, do you want to ask now, or do you?
Yeah, just one last point about that. Having served on other boards, I've seen the selectman liaison really morph into two different types of model. One is where the selectmen had so many things to do that they were able not to participate in all the meetings, but more to become a conduit for communication. That's how the role really evolved. In other cases, I saw, situations where the selectmen did have not a lot of time, but had enough time to participate in all the meetings. And at some point, it became a question of the rest of the committee turning to the selectmen and saying, so what shall we do? And where the selectman was not necessarily just a participant, but was almost, leading the meeting, which was not the intention, and it was not the intention of that selectman or anybody on the board, but people just naturally out of deference to that person, elected official, will say, well, what do you think we should be doing? So it can have a good effect or a negative effect. It depends a lot on the personality and the board's personality as well.
Great. Well, as I mentioned, we'll be taking this up for a vote after the break. I'll certainly give you full advance notice, Judy, as to when that will be. And I very much thank all of you for coming tonight. We really appreciate your input on this. So thank you very much. Okay, the next item we're going to discuss tonight is the Town Hall Architectural Engineering warrant article. Please come forth. Craig or Tom, which one is leading? Craig. Just give me 1 second, Aaron. Sorry, I have short-term memory issues. I even wrote it down, so thank you for reminding me. Recuse yourself. Yeah, thanks.
Let me read Article Y for the viewers. Are we being televised?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Let me read Article Y, and I would also read my comment. Article Y, will the town appropriate a sum of money to be expended at the direction of the Board of Selectmen for the purpose of studying the space needs and operational requirements of town departments, agencies, and committees, other than the school department, evaluating the feasible options for addressing their infrastructure needs at Town Hall or elsewhere, and reporting results and recommendations from the study to town meeting or act on anything relating thereto. My comment came from attending the Town Hall Study Committee meeting January 25th, taking notes, and then sharing it with them on February 8th, I believe, and which received, thankfully, a great deal of support with no biggies in terms of changes, other than perhaps what has happened since then. I'm going to read you my comment. The Town Hall Study Committee is requesting $50,000 for professional services to evaluate the expanding needs of police, elder services, recreation, school administration, and other general government functions at Town Hall that service the Hingham community. They include, meaning the money for services to be evaluated. They include a traffic and parking study to assess traffic flow and parking needs for town government business, police, senior center, school administration, recreation, civic activity, vehicle storage, and employee parking. 2, a structural engineering evaluation of the physical plant framework, infrastructure, and potential for modification and additions. 3, a systems evaluation of climate control, heating, air conditioning, electrical, water, sewer, data, and other record storage and retrieval, and telecommunications, which includes information technology, landed cell phone, cable, computer, internet, wireless, and cloud or off-site storage functions and needs. This is an assessment only, although plans from previous studies are available. No design expenses requested at this time. The outcome of this study is to provide an in-depth analysis of requirements for square footage, logistics, and structural systems for town offices to function for the next 20 years. The charge of this committee is to assess, compile, and propose option solutions to a future town meeting. In addition to a complete facility infrastructure assessment, the study will entail 1, interviewing all department heads, representatives, or appropriate services to assess current and future office space and storage needs. Number 2, evaluating civic activity flow, space usage, and value to the community. 3, assessing public access to services that town government provides. And 4, inviting and incorporating public comment to the evaluation process. There may be other services considered for assignment to Town Hall that may be essential to the building or centralized town government that do not have space at this facility. And as a backdrop of history, Town Hall was dedicated in 1998 as a civic center after renovation that converted the building from the former Central Junior High School. Planning began 26 years ago in 1991. In December 2012, the Town Hall Study Committee was established and charged by the Board of Selectmen to study both present and future uses of Town Hall and discuss a range of potential options. This initiative was placed on hold when town focus was redirected to consider negotiation, acquisition, and renovation of privately owned properties for sale, with the intention that the senior center and recreation, administrative, and activity services would vacate Town Hall. That was the Hingham Mutual consideration. Relocation of these departments would thus create space for remaining Town Hall services to expand. The town was unable to acquire these properties. The Town Hall Study Committee was reconvened in January 2017. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously 3-0 in support of this article on February 14th, 2017. And with that, Tom?
Thank you. I'm Tom Carey, 1131 Main Street, and I chair the Town Hall Study Committee. I think the comment really brings you completely up to speed. I'm happy to talk about the work of the committee over the past 4 years and give you a sense of what we're dealing with, sort of what we know and how we intend to proceed from there. The particular item you're concerned with tonight is the appropriation, so let me start there. I would hope it is obvious to everyone that $50,000 is not enough money to start a project. This is not money that is going toward a predetermined goal. It's not money for architectural studies. It's not the sort of seed money that a building committee would want to begin design services. It's more a matter of being sure, well, let me say that the current members of the Town Hall Study Committee include Jerry Seelan, who had to leave, a local architect who was the co-architect of this building in the original project, and so we have wonderful architectural services available to us for nothing. I do think we probably shouldn't be hitting them up for printing any reports or plans or anything. Also, Charlie Cristello, who was our town administrator at the time of this project, who went on to an even larger community and is about as knowledgeable about municipal government and the needs of various kinds of departments as anyone in the Commonwealth. Ron Curvin, who is here, is our fellow who gives us strong background in building systems and construction and general knowledge of these matters. And Tina Sherwood is also serving on the committee. Among her other town activities, some of you may recall, she was involved in the Central Fire Station Building Committee. And despite that experience, we managed to talk her back on to this one. What we have in mind are such things as we want a professional traffic study. The traffic and parking issues are strangling the use of Town Hall. They clearly have to be addressed. Right now, we don't know anything other than anecdotal. And you can stand and look and say, oh, it's all wreck. See that line of cars picking kids up. Or another day, you could stand like the first day of voting and say, it's all the town clerk. Look at all these people wanting to vote in the presidential election. Or you could take your pick, because that morning yoga was going on in the fields as well. So who do you blame? We want to get a sense with some professional assistance of what the traffic flow is. That would give us the opportunity to at least put some data to the question, if we moved X out of Town Hall, what impact would that have, and so on. The other thing is, we've identified some possibilities of reworking the existing structure to expand or accommodate some of these departments. We would not like to float that as a realistic option for the town to consider without doing at least some preliminary engineering and structural examination to be sure that it is feasible. So it's those kinds of things that we're talking about. With respect to the reference to the word elsewhere, feasible options for addressing infrastructure needs at Town Hall or elsewhere. The word elsewhere is in order to make it clear that we're not going to be limiting ourselves to what solutions might be available here, but that we're going to take, say, the senior center, evaluate, get all the data. What are the space needs for the senior center? Whether it's new construction, if you can find somewhere, whether it's another building, if you can buy it, as the town was in negotiations to do with Hingham Mutual for a while, or whether it's can we fit it here. We have no intention of going out with drilling rigs all over town, taking different sites. Our fundamental goal is to get to the town a decision tree where you can analyze with hard data what the status of all of your current departments are, what a reasonable description of their needs is, what that means in terms of whether additional space or facilities are needed for those departments to fulfill their obligations now and for the foreseeable future. And to give the town a list of options. And then have the debate, advisory committee, public meetings, elsewhere, as to what we want to do. I think this is an appropriate time to do that. I would like to be able to go back and revise some of what I wrote a quarter of a century ago in the study plan, where I thought that this was going to solve the needs of Hingham for 35 to 50 years. I swear, I think 35 is there somewhere. The ignorance of youth. Obviously, it has been 25 years since the planning. This committee has not been doing nothing, even though really moving forward was delayed as other options were being considered for factors we don't need to worry about now. We were doing our work. We've already done a lot of interviews of departments. We're going back over it. I think it's fair to say, based on our preliminary evaluations and just pretty much on what everyone knows, that the police station needs work. Since then, the department has expanded. There have been significant operational changes. We went to regional dispatch and combined dispatch, fire, and police. As a result, the desk where when you arrive at the police station, everything behind there is empty. 25 years ago, it was filled with communications equipment. It was the heart of everything. The department's grown, locker space is short, the room where they have turnout when shifts change is not big enough. Part of the administrative space on the second floor was cannibalized for servers. It's a lot of things like that. The good news is that the cells are still sufficient. They're not even all in use. That's partly because of operational changes in the way, pre-charged incarceration takes place. It's partly a change. We did some modification of operations to make things work more smoothly. I say that's good news, not because it means that there's no crime in Hingham, but that little suite of cells and the armory and where you bring prisoners in was the single most expensive part of this entire complex. The building codes that control space where you are incarcerating and locking people up 24 hours a day are really demanding. So if it were feasible to provide enough additional space to have and reorganization of the department's operations, not to have to go to another site and try to rebuild a brand new police station, all of which are expensive, all of which get very big very fast, and not having to do that because the basics of that most expensive part are already available to us. would seem like an option that the town would want to take a hard look at. When you're thinking, well, gee, could you get more space where they are, the first thing that comes to mind is what's most proximate to them, and it's the 5,000 square feet where the senior center is. Now, when you say, oh yeah, the senior center, how are they doing? They used to have 350 square feet at Hersey House. We moved them here and they had 5,000 square feet and were ecstatic. And they now are just overly cramped and don't have enough space to do all the good work that they are doing. There are a couple of members of the, well, Barbara Farnsworth, the director, and a representative from the Council on Aging are here tonight. They've already produced a report. It's 3 years old or so now, demonstrating what they see as the needs for the senior center. We've taken a preliminary look at it. I can tell you that if you compare, there's a lot of talk about comparing us with others. Sometimes you have to be careful what the comparisons are. But I can tell you with assurance that recent local communities that have built new senior centers have built pretty damn big structures, like up to 50,000 square feet. So any 20, 25,000 through 50, you will find in various communities. Now there's different factors in each place, and I don't suggest for a moment that I think or that we have made any determination in the $50,000 range, 50,000 square foot range. But I can say that on the preliminary analysis and examination, it looks to us as though when all the facts are out, the community would like to see an option to provide additional space for the senior center. Again, our primary goal is we haven't made decisions, there is no plan, but I think we know enough to realize that it's time to take a hard look and see what our needs really are and to evaluate what options we have to addressing those needs. 25 years ago, when we did this project, things were a little different, but we did have a sense, based in part on a report from Roger Hoyt, a local architect, that town operations were scattered among multiple buildings, that none of them were working well. It turned out all of these buildings had severe code problems, they were inadequate. Separate departments were talking about how they were going to increase their little building or what they were going to do. And with an overall study of everything and say, what are our best options, it pretty quickly became clear that the then abandoned 90,000 square foot central junior high would be an ideal location to bring all of these together. And we ended up with the town hall and civic center that we have today. Overall, it's been a success. Overall, some of the synergies of having these multiple groups in the same building have proven their worth. When we were, I'm a library trustee, so I've been involved in the library thinking about the future. When you look at it, all of these various departments share certain needs, meeting space being a major one of them. And having them all in one place where you can share these spaces brings significant savings. So we're going to, hopefully by next year, do our work and present, as I say, a decision tree of options to address all of these factors, or at least to begin to think about them carefully. I would suggest to you, based upon current numbers and everything, that the 50,000 is a reasonable request to give us the backdrop we need to be sure that options that are suggested will in fact be feasible. So that's the pitch, and I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. One quick question or comment for you. Doug Foley, have you seen his report? He did an assessment of the systems of Town Hall within the last year. So I don't know if you have a chance to review that. That's a very good resource for at least a starting point of some assessment.
We definitely will. Ron was meeting with the Assistant Town Administrator today. I don't know whether he got that report, but we will get it.
Yeah, it's very helpful. They assess the HVAC systems and all those things that are here. They're in better shape than I would have thought, I think, was his assessment. But any questions for the committee for Tom?
Go ahead,
Tom.
I just had, in your addressing the term elsewhere, my main concern was that the funds you asked for would be spent for here, not elsewhere.
That's correct. That we have no intention of spending any of those funds elsewhere. If we were to recommend an alternative location and felt that there had to be some assessment made before doing that, we would ask the selectmen to appropriate out of their engineering fund. We're not spending this money on other sites. That would be for, if the town were to decide it wanted to go that way, I assume that thereafter we would follow our usual processes of building committees for particular projects and approval by town meeting and appointment and all of that.
And then my second point is that in my recommendation, which is not complete right now, there will be a change in wording about other than the schools.
Yeah, that's my fault. The draft says, et cetera, other than the school department. And my intention there was to make it clear that we're not trying to take over the schools or the elected school department. They have a entire process, state law, local, for dealing with schools. We're not sticking our nose in there. And then I realized that when I wrote school department instead of just other than schools, I inadvertently left Dot up on the third floor here in her administrative offices, and it sounded as though I was saying, but we're throwing you under the bus. We don't intend to. We designed that for her or for the school department originally, and frankly, bringing the town side administrators and school department into the same building where they can communicate closely has been one of the major operational advantages of the entire thing. I know things are getting tight up there. I spoke with her 2 or 3 years ago, and we will do the same evaluation over there. So that's the primary reason for suggesting that change in language.
So, Tom, your remark actually began to touch on my question, which is that there are several other administrative departments that are currently housed here at Town Hall that support the mission of separately elected boards, even beyond the school committee. For instance, the Community Planning Department supports the mission of the separately elected planning board. The office and function space that's devoted to recreation supports the mission of the separately elected Recreation Commission. So especially when your evaluation gets into thinking about elsewhere, potential other options outside of Town Hall, what's your vision for the role that those separately elected boards and their members are going to play in your evaluation?
Well, they'll have an integral part of it. One of the advantages of the project was that we brought some of those boards that had separate housing in together under one roof. In fact, before we had advanced enough to call it the Community Planning Department, and we had isolated fiefdoms in different buildings. And so a poor person who wanted to put an addition on his house had to come to town hall to meet with the building commissioner. Then he had to go to the fire department to meet with the fire department, and so we consolidated them all in one location. We would talk not only to the department heads, but to the boards. We've already had preliminary discussions with the Recreation Board, and we intend to continue those. We have no authority to dictate anything to anybody. We're a study committee. We're going to take information from everybody. We're going to get their views. If we make a recommendation that they don't like, we're just the beginning of the discussion, because there's going to be public forums, there's your group, there's the selectmen, and so on and so forth. So everybody's gonna have a say. I don't know whether we can accommodate everything here. I'm not sure whether it's desirable to accommodate everything here. There may be departments who would dearly love to escape and be somewhere else. It's all going to be for the town to decide, but we are going to give you the data and the pros and cons of alternative lines of decision.
Sounds like a strong, inclusive process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim?
Two quick questions. I'll tell you both, and you can answer them. First, wondering, is any of this plan in the scope of expanding the building towards the back into the Cronin athletic fields?
There's no plan yet whatsoever. Whether there would be a need to do that would obviously be one of the things that we would have to look at.
Okay. And also looking at the activities and what the needs are for this building, are you also looking at how you can streamline the processes in terms of reducing the amount of traffic that comes to this building? There are certain departments here that I think would benefit from more digital age and internet use, that the actual physical person doesn't need to come here, which reduces the amount of traffic and the need.
Right. Yes. There was no IT department when we did this design the last time. Didn't exist. It exists now. Unfortunately, what happens when you're dealing with things on the fly and something new comes up is that we have managed to site our IT department with all its electrical and power needs and servers in the wooden portion of the 1928 building. And it's down the hall and it's in a closet, and I would dearly love to at least maybe get it pushed over to the 60s part of the building. And we do want to take a look at that. Another aspect of that is HCAM. As you people know, HCAM has been casting about for a number of years with a thought of getting a permanent location. In fits and starts and looking at possible available sites and so on and so forth. Among the things they've done is they've had discussions with the library. There are complications there, some legal, some others. And I've talked to them about town hall. They have some space here for their broadcasting needs, but their major operations are in rental space up the other end of town. I would like to look at whether there's any feasibility of bringing their operations somewhere around here. Granted, it's not a government agency. Granted, they have to have some independence. But along the lines of improving communication in ways, I think that's something we should look at. Clearly, IT, if we can get them located operationally in a better system, or at least make allowance for whatever increase in servers and the like they need so as to do more of the business. And I'm in complete agreement with you about digitizing town operations. That is one aspect of evaluating how the departments are operating and what their needs are that we intend to talk about. 25 years ago, it was just about seeing if you could get the damn offices together so you only had to carry your paper plans from one to the other. I'm ready to be more aggressive on that, and I think the departments are too. Everybody's adjusting to this. For example, storage space. We have a vault downstairs that is designed to withstand a nuclear explosion. It's like back in high school hiding under a table. It has all of that capability because it was built to state specifications for the kind of archival storage you're supposed to have for critical records that can't be lost. Now, you'd say, how many of those do we have? Well, the vault's pretty full. I'm not sure all of what's in there. We have stuff upstairs. We've begun a process of archiving a lot of this historical data, much of which is absolute treasure. When we were working on this project, I found the original blueprints from the library and the town hall in a dusty old storage bin, which were very helpful when that project came along. So as we're thinking about identifying what needs to be archived and figuring out appropriate storage for the originals of that archival stuff, those are all things that ought to be paid attention to.
I'm also talking about putting in services that are run through an internet or computer systems, so a person doesn't have to come to town hall, so that they can pay for a permit from their home or their office, don't need to come here and apply and pay for a permit or for taxes or whatever. It's all less traffic of people needing to come here. It's digitized, there's less paperwork. It might result in a smaller town government in terms of personnel in the end.
Yeah.
But again, you're saving space in, looking at that aspect as opposed to, as well as just making the building bigger to hold more people.
I agree, it ought to be looked at, and I consider it to be within our charge. When we did all of this the first time, that was one of the things that we considered to be part. You can't assess space needs without evaluating the manner in which the department is operating and figuring out, do you need that many desks? Do you need that many chairs? How come you have so many filing cabinets? And in today's digital world, it morphs into the kinds of things you're discussing.
Any other questions on this one? Anyone in the audience? Great. Well, thank you, Tom, very much for being here. We're going to be voting on this article after break, and we'll communicate that night to you.
Thank you.
But we'll know shortly. Thank you again for all you do.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, Tom, there's nobody here from South Shore Country Club, is there?
No.
Okay, I'm going to skip that one, because I know we have some friends. Are you here? Oh, great. Julie, would you like to discuss K then, please?
So Article K is one of two revolving fund articles, which the other one is for the building department revolving fund that Erin Kelly has, and she'll be presenting after the break. So these are usual perennial articles to reestablish the revolving fund. However, this year things are different because, as I laid out in my comment, that there's a Municipal Modernization Act, which was passed late last year, which was an effort to grant more local control and encourage fiscal efficiency in municipalities. So as part of that Modernization Act, that affected this article and the Building Fund Revolving Fund article. So this year, just for this year, this article will seek to do three things. First of all, we would change the bylaw, Section 7, Article 16 of the Town of Hingham bylaws per this change in, per the Municipal Modernization Act. The second thing would be to reestablish the Department of Elder Services revolving fund until the bylaw becomes effective, which should be within months after town meeting of this year. And then finally, set the revolving fund cap for fiscal year 2018 at $60,000. After this year, there will be an annual town meeting article for the Department of Elder Services revolving fund. However, the article will only be required to set the cap on the revolving fund. So does anyone have any questions?
I have one, and I've already mentioned it to Julie. It's minor. I wanted to address it to Sue. In the past, we have shown the cents as well as the dollars when we show the balances from prior years. The same question applies to the building revolving fund. Do we need to show that, or can we just round those up?
In the
Do you know?
comment?
In the comment.
Yeah, we can totally round it
I
up.
mean, we have never done that, but it seems to me we don't need to be showing cents on these articles.
It's our comment, so I think we're within our bounds to
Okay.
round up or down.
Minor, but
depending upon.
since I look at style stuff, I'm
Yeah,
not
I know,
arguing
you're-
articles, so.
Okay, so I will
Just amend your comment.
amend the comment and just round up or down. in a
Great, would
sense.
you like to make a motion?
Can I ask
Oh,
one
sure.
quick question, Jim? I can't remember. Does this revolving fund have any restrictions on it in terms of use, what it can be used for or not? Is it, we have other revolving funds in this town that they're restrictive of how they can be spent or how much can be spent of it in any particular time period.
It's restricted for senior center-related programs.
That's
Yeah,
it.
so
I mean,
as
it's
I
not-
understand
that's all
it,
they
it's
can
money
spend it
coming in from programs and money going out to
Right, but
pay.
it can be used for anything that has to be in any amount for the senior center at any time.
Yes, under the management of the Director of Elder Services.
Okay.
Yes. Julie would like to make a motion?
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that the town amend the general bylaws of the town of Hingham by amending Article 16 of the general bylaws by adding the following new Section 7 at the end of said Article 16. Do you want me to go through?
No, you can just specify as written.
Okay, as written. And further to establish said Elder Services revolving fund for fiscal year 2018 in accordance with the above provisions, and to limit the total amount that may be spent from said Elder Services revolving fund to $60,000 during fiscal year 2018.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Julie, thank you very much. Thank you for coming this evening. We're going to now head to capital outlay, and then we'll come back and do, Tom will do the Historic Country Club after capital outlay, if no one's here. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry it's a little later than I had hoped, but we really appreciate you being here. Craig, would you like to make introductions and?
Absolutely, thank you, Tom.
Jim.
I think most everybody's familiar with capital outlay, but just to give you a little bit of context. At the same time, we all received our budget books for operating expenses. Some of us were lucky enough to also receive another binder, which is for the capital outlay budget. The capital outlay committee is made up of 5 individuals. Libby Claypool, who just moved up to the front here, is the chairperson and appointed by the town administrator, the town moderator. There are 2 at-large members also appointed by the town moderator, and at this point in time, they're Brendan Kiernan and Tim Finnerty. And then 2 of us on AdCom are lucky enough to participate on the committee, and it just so happens we're sitting next to each other, Eric and myself. The capital outlay process is similar to the process that we do for operating expenses. All of the department heads are required to provide a needs list for their capital items for the year. We ask them to prioritize them in terms of the need for those items. As Libby will go through, we have a process that we undertake, and I won't steal her thunder. But it has us arrive at a budget which has factored in not only the cost of items that are necessary, but also at times of prioritization, since we aren't able to always fund all the requests that are requested. This year in the budget, I think you'll all remember there is a line item that is in the budget for $2,250,000 That was at one point in time targeted to be $2,300,000 because we were trying to add $100,000 every year to increase our capital budget. This year, with things looking a little tight, I think, when Ted put the projected budget together, we scaled that back by $50,000. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Libby. She will walk through the details and give us the recommendations and results.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, hello, everybody. My committee has gone home to go to sleep. We presented earlier in the evening at
Most of your
BOS.
committee, yes.
I'm sorry, most of my
We're still here,
committee.
Libby.
The most important members are here. But Craig introduced those other members, and I've streamlined the presentation this year, so it'll be nice and short. And what I thought I would do is when I go through everything is just kind of give you the framework, and then maybe at the end of it, if there are specific questions about the budget, then we can get into that. And as you all know, the town's financial policy states that capital expenditures need to be between 2% and 5% of the operating budget. And the fiscal 18 forecast hasn't been finalized, but I believe that the latest one is January 31st.
Yes, it is.
And the budget that I'm going to be presenting tonight is about 2.7% of the operating budget. And so that is in the policy range, albeit on the low end. And so if you look at last year's warrant, which I know you guys are familiar because this is from the AdCom report, but it's a nice bar graph and lets you see how we've been in compliance or not in the last few years. And so we have, in the last 3 fiscal years, and I guess 4 if you include where we expect to be for fiscal 18, we will be in compliance. And but previously, we were below the range for a 5-year period. And so for about 10 of the last 15 years, we've actually been in compliance. So I think some of those 5-year periods were during some of the economic down years. So it's kind of an extreme circumstance. But as we've mentioned before, capital assets are typically, they have a useful economic life of more than 5 years, and they cost more than $10,000 or are otherwise classified as a fixed asset on the town's financial statements. And as Craig kind of laid out our process, we have a list of criteria that we use, and I'll just read through those real quickly. Some of you that have been on the committee in the past may be somewhat familiar with them, but and some of our former members, like Lisa and me, will know these criteria very well. So they are, number 1, if lack of the particular capital item puts citizens or town employee safety at risk. Number 2, if the capital item is broken. 3, if the capital item is core to the department's mission, the department cannot function without it. 4, if the capital item is still functional but repairs are required that would cost 25% or more of the new item purchase price. 5, if the capital item is substantially over its originally projected life and its failure would jeopardize the performance of the department's overall mission. And 6, if the cost of the capital item can be recovered in 3 years or less. So they're kind of summarized as risk, if it's broken, it's core, repairs, old, or if there is a payback. And so as far as the process goes, as Craig laid out, when we get our budget, we go through each and every one of the requests and determine if it meets our criteria. And once we have determined that, then we will lay out a priority, and we will consider each request given the department's priority, and we will also see how it lays within the budget as a whole. And we then at the end will reconsider anything after that first pass. If there's anything we've laid out to defer, we will then reconsider any of those items that are slated for possible deferral, to just kind of step back and say, how is deferring this item going to impact the particular department's 5-year plan? And also, we consider the future capital plans of various departments to ensure that we're allocating the town's resources efficiently. So if, for example, during the years of when the library was discussing some of the potential renovations there, obviously we were cautious about the amount of money we would allocate to that, knowing that there potentially could be a renovation in the future. So if you look at the, well, actually, this is We started with 4 million, this is at the beginning of our deliberation process. We started with $4,265,597 of requests, and through either deferral or potentially warrant articles, as we know, the harbor development or harbor improvement warrant article includes some seawall work. We originally had, I think it was $325,000 in our budget for Martin's Lane, so that would have been a deferral. Hawk, which I think that warrant article has been pulled.
Yes, it
Okay.
has. Yep.
So the footnotes that you have, we'll edit those as things evolve, and we may actually need to come back for one final pass on updated footnotes, but the amount that we're recommending for the fiscal 18 won't change. And so after those various deferrals and warrant articles and whatnot, we have come to a budget of $3 million. And this is from all sources. This is on the last page of the 5-year plan that you have. So the funding from all sources of $3,213,217. And I would just point out that we like to, when we go through these requests, one of the categories we also use is an annual category. And I just like to quantify what are our annual requests that are made that are really non-discretionary. They might be items that are so core to a department, like for the fire department, the fire hydrants, the turnout gear. They're things that we see every year, and so there is almost $600,000 worth in this year's budget of annual expenditures. Then on top of that, typically the police department has about $218,000 worth of vehicles. So given this year's number, it's about $817,000 that's non-discretionary. I'm going to mention a little bit in not too long about the police figure number that we just added to that, because that was actually a late budget cycle amount that was pulled off. But normally those are what we would consider our annual expenses. So we just like to give that to you guys and BOS so they know kind of that portion of our budget is non-discretionary. So if you look at the total on that last page, if you see the funding sources, we are recommending, as I mentioned, the total of $3,213,217, and they come from 3 funding sources. First is the tax levy, $2,009,462, and fund balance, and this is specifically the mooring permits, of $72,000, and that is the money that funds the police and harbor master. This year, there is also an additional $32,000 in that, which is for the fire department. There are some boat engines that are funded as part of that. And the final category is the user rates and charges, which is $1,131,755, and that is for funding for the sewer department, the country club, and for rec. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the department totals just to have on the record the total amount we're recommending, and then I just have a couple of comments on sort of long-term capital needs, and then I'll open it up to if there are specific questions on any of the capital requests that are on the budget. So going through the department totals, we have for information technology, $146,060. For town hall, $128,482. For the police department, $133,500, and 40 of which is funded by mooring permits. That is the harbor master 2 line items you see as the last 2 requests. For the fire department, we have $150,000, and that has $32,000. I believe it's the last item, which is for some boat engines. For Public Works Highway, the total there is $466,600. For Public Works Transfer Station, the total is $159,000. For the Sewer Department, the total is $698,000, and again, that is one of the departments that is funded by user rates and charges, or self-funded, interchangeable terms. The library, $40,000. The Recreation Department, $85,000. and again, that is funded by user rates and charges. The South Shore Country Club, $348,755, again, funded by user rates and charges. And for the school department, for East Elementary, we have $89,002. And we have for Foster Elementary, $30,000. The high school, $62,000. The middle school, $15,000. For Plymouth River, $47,000. For South Elementary, $6,500. And school system-wide totals, $601,318, for a total school capital expenditure of $850,820, and that list totals to $3,213,217. So again, there are footnotes there, which I just would remind you to take a look at, and just touching on, again, a couple of the minor changes too. The committee will get together for another meeting to discuss some of these issues, but for example, there's a footnote, I think it's for fiscal 19 on the quint for the fire department, the $1,495,000, I think it is. There's a footnote that $1 million of that is potentially coming from the Avalon. Avalon Bay is contributing that. So the committee will discuss right now. It occurred to me after I wrote the footnote that we're showing the whole amount up above. So I may actually have, I wonder if I put the $1 million under fund balance, thinking that, did I do that? Thinking that it might, it's going to be an inflow. So technically, the outflow of the $1 million would come from that same source. Actually, I did do that in fiscal 19, if you look at the last page.
Yes.
So I did note that as available reserves, and I'm showing it's coming from there because presumably it will go into there when Avalon Bay contributes that to the town. So if you look at our capital, and again, that summary page, which lists those funding sources, as Craig mentioned, there's this target that we get each year, and it's, as was laid out on the original forecast, it was the $2 million, well, I always thought it was $2,300,000, but I found out, and I might have been at that tour at the schools that day at Foster, that it was $2,250,000, so I said, wow, I guess we're the last to know, but it was reduced. I think that $50K, just, you may already be aware, was for the, I think it was the snow
Snow
removal
and ice.
budget.
Yes.
That they reallocated that money. So our target, and I don't, Craig, I think you mentioned that we don't work to the target. We go through every request, and we have a spreadsheet where we just fill in the priority, and then it's like this big kind of, Lucy remembers the drum roll at the end, kind of where are we? What's that total? And so we really go at it that way and see where we are. So we don't force that number. We don't try to backfill to that number. So that's really our process. So using that target of the $2.25 million, that target is, if you're looking at the sources, it's really the first 4 line items, and it is meant to be from all funding sources except borrowings, which again would not be on that first page of the budget forecast, and the user rates and charges. So the number that we're given as a target is primarily the tax levy, and if the town, after we approve our budget, decides they're going to pull stuff from either excess overlay or available reserves, that's sort of their budget balancing option, but we will give to them our recommendation. So for this year, there's only 2 numbers that are in that category of everything except borrowing and user rates, and that is the levy and the moorings. So that total is $2,081,462 if you just add up, and really, all that is the total of 3.2 less the self-funded, and so that total, if you think about it, that is in comparison to the $2,250,000 of where the town sort of expected us to be. And there is one request I referred to earlier that the police department removed, which is it was $218,000 for cruisers. So being the financial person that I am, I said, well, if you add that back, then boy, we're right at 2.299. And again, we laugh all the time that it seems contrived, but it is truly where the numbers ended up. And so we would have been right at that $2.3 million target that the town had originally laid out. So what that tells us as a committee is those targets are reasonable. This was an unusual circumstance this year that got pulled off the table. And just to explain that a little bit, the police chief, Glenn Olson, and Lieutenant John Norkitis, who you guys may, I don't know if, when they come before you, if they talk about that they manage the fleet, but what they determined that they could do is based on the condition of the current fleet. They have money that was approved and allocated in last year's warrant for cruisers for the current fiscal year. We're in 17, and they determined that if they can wait until after July 1st, so they'll probably encumber the money at June 30 and buy them shortly thereafter, they can, in a sense, they're making 2018 a no-buy year. And that is not because we said there was any financial pressure for them to do it. They did what I consider wise management of the departments, is they came to us and said, you know, we evaluate the fleet every year, and you know, probably during the fall when it was crazy and they were doing their budgets, they put it on there, but then they had time to kind of really look at the fleet, and they determined that they could make that shift. And just for your information, because I said, geez, didn't we have a no-buy year recently? Fiscal 18 was a no-buy year, and then fiscal 8. So to have 16. So to have one so close to the most recent one is unusual. So that, I think, says a lot about how they're managing the fleet. I think, you know, Craig, Lucy, you guys have been on Capital. This is my 7th year on it. We've been on it a long time. We know that, you know, remember the days of the fleet being Crown Victorias. Well, now it's all these Ford Interceptors. They're really, you know, they're nice vehicles, and I think, you know, I don't want to get my hopes up that in the future they can stretch the life out a little bit, because the lieutenant did caution me. It's really a year-by-year thing. We look at the fleet, but we were in a good situation this year, so we will take it. And so potentially then, if you look at the 5-year, there could be a no-buy year, because now all of a sudden 18's a no-buy, but then we've got 19 through 22 on the 5-year as buy years. It's very possible one of those out years will become a no-buy, but for conservative financial planning, we said let's leave it on there, and they will do what they always do and evaluate the fleet, and if it comes off, great. And so, again, we do appreciate the police department's diligence on that, because they were really the ones who did come to us to discuss that. So again, if you look at the 2.25 original target, if you will call it that, the $2,081,000 that we're coming in at is about $168,538 below what's on the latest forecast. And so I think it's important to note that any deferrals or reductions that did not meet our criteria are not in our recommendation. So we did not all of a sudden change our criteria and say, we got, and try to backfill to that number. We really, we look at it as if it was our money, and we said, would we spend this? Do we think it's worth replacing whatever the particular items are that we had to defer? And so we can't always count on this situation. It was a nice situation to be in, but we continue to just remind Board of Selectmen and the town administrator who was at that meeting that they have promised us that this $100,000 increment will continue. But the only thing I would not edit what you said, Craig, but it kind of it had an end. It was 2.5. We're at 2.3 was the target for this year, and so it'll be 2.4 in fiscal 19. So we never could get them to promise anything more than 2.5 in fiscal 20, but we're going to keep, you know, the asset bases are continuing, so we hope that they'll continue to increase it. And I think that based on the kind of things that we had to defer this year, I don't feel that we had much, if any, backlog, so that's been an issue in the past where we've really been kind of playing catch-up. So I feel like some of the increased funding we've gotten over the last probably 3 years, really, has helped us to make a dent into that. But, you know, the town's capital needs are not going to go away. So we really hope that this committee, Selectmen, that they continue to give us the adequate funding that we need, because we don't want to be in that situation of playing catch-up if we don't have to be. And then sort of finally, I guess, under the category of really kind of our long-term needs, is that, you know, the town has significant assets. We have probably, $210 million or so in buildings. That does not include the contents. And our committee, it replaces those contents on a regular basis, whether it's computers or all of those things that, furniture at the library. So, you know, it's easily 240, and these figures are from, that I saw from a report, came from, I think it was 2010. So the thing that was different to get to the 210, not to get into the weeds, but, you know, I think was just the adjustment for the middle school and East School. But other than that, the bulk of the value of that 210 was really assets at that time. So, you know, they're depreciating, so you can look at the value. I think it's a reasonable number to look at, but it's a big number. And we know that there's numerous building projects and renovations being planned for the future. So our committee continues to be concerned that while the town's going to have, and I know there's a lot of discussion about debt being reduced, and the town may have the debt capacity to build these projects, but with that is going to become an increased need to be able to fund, an increased funding requirement to maintain all these assets. So, and then also with that could become, as we have a larger asset base, the COC through warrants going back to 2012, we've made comments about needing potentially someone to manage these assets, needing to have some kind of a system for these assets. So we look at it and say, well, with that much of a larger asset base, you know, there potentially could be a greater need to just establish a system to track these assets and then to monitor the assets and the subsystems. I mean, we've got that in warrants going back for quite a while. So we have not always been, I guess our requests have not always been received the way we'd like them to be, but all we can do is to just every year remind everybody that we think it's important. So, and then, you know, obviously, looking at the budget, the operating budget, it consumes the lion's shares of available funding. So in the not-too-distant future, I'm sure nobody's more aware than this committee that we face the real possibility of potentially having an operating override. And just in order to balance the budget. And so we say in our committee, well, we've really, I hate to use the word fought, but we've had to really advocate for capital to get the adequate funding. And so where is the money going to come from to continue to meet the greater needs that we have, because we are usually the last figure that gets put in the budget. So we think we've gotten away from the days where it was kind of like, well, what's left? And then it's a plug, and you say, okay, here's what capital gets. We feel like we've moved out of those days. So in conclusion, we feel like the town's long-term capital needs are going to continue to be discussed, but we've got to balance our long-term needs with our current capital funding limitations. So, and of course, I want to thank my committee for all their hard work this season, and I think we got lucky. We didn't have any snow days or late nights like you guys have had, but late, but not that late. So I guess I'll open it up if anybody has any particular questions on the 5-year. I will again reiterate, we really go through these and feel that they meet every one of those criteria. So there's certainly some top-level things that may be important to just kind of bring to your attention, but other than that,
Great.
Feel free.
Libby, number one, thank you very much. I know how hard you work on this, and I know how hard the committee works, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I'm really gratified to see that this year, that in your normal course of work, you came in at a level you felt was appropriate for this budget, and it happened to come in below the budgeted item. So that tells me that those 5 years of underfunding capital may be the catch-up may be behind us. That we'll have annual capital needs.
Right.
But you don't feel like you're missing, or there's a lot of deferred capital needs today because you've effectively funded everything you feel is an appropriate level to be funded this year.
Yes, but those police vehicles, so
But
don't.
no, I understand that. I
You
mean,
know,
we
that
got
would have
lucky.
put us right there, so what we're saying is, yeah.
But we got lucky.
But I think we're all at the same, we recognize that that's our
Yeah.
level, that's our funding
It
level.
feels like we're past
Yes.
those really dark days of really
Yes.
feeling like we've underfunded capital significantly.
Following a plan.
Yeah, which is really
Mm-hmm.
gratifying to see in here.
Yeah.
But I take your comments to heart about, you know, as the town matures, as we build new buildings, as we put new things in them, capital needs will never go away. And the continued investment in our capital is critical for our town to do. But it is very gratifying as the advisory committee to get this number, because it's below, you know, and we're looking, it's a difficult year for us.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to hear it came naturally, too.
It truly did, and
Yeah.
it is really ironic. I mean, in my 7 years on the committee, how it really, I mean, there were earlier days where we couldn't get what we wanted, and we were the other way, where, you know,
Right.
I mean, I think from the first time I was on Capitol, Lucy, you were on, and you remember the days where, you know, we'd make our first pass, and we're like, oh, we're over. So we'd have to go make another pass. But we've been really fortunate particularly the last 3 years, and where we've really been in a position where we've receive the funding that we need, and we don't feel like we're kind of having to give a haircut to what we already picked. It really did come organically, and I know that some departments may not believe that, and they may think we actually even by department look at percentages. After the fact, we might, just to kind of see where it ended up, but it is truly an organic process, and so.
It's good to see. It's good
yeah.
to see that it worked out that way.
Yep.
I have one question on one line item, and that's
Yes.
around the school and Chromebooks.
Yes.
So I would expect now that will be has that already been an annual item?
Yes, that started, I think it was in 2014, they purchased a group of Chromebooks with the, was it the middle school?
Middle school building.
Building funds.
Yes.
We cautioned the school department at that point in time that you can use excess building funds to buy things all day long. But I can't sit here today and commit to you that we can, when that life cycle of those comes up, that we can refresh those for you. We don't know what our budgets are going to be at that time. Now, they started to, in addition to their baseline capital for technology, add kind of a new initiative number, because at that point, Park was in play, and they felt that they needed to, not felt, they had to, as one of the pilot schools that were doing that, had to invest money in that. So we had that placeholder, and the way it worked out, I think we were able to fund those Chromebooks this year, but then they also gave us kind of another list where you'll notice there's another line item on there. I'm trying to think of the exact name, but we funded it with, I think it was $28,000.
Enhancements and new initiatives.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, I don't want to say redundant, but it's an issue of semantics, but those truly were what they consider new initiatives. They looked at the other category of the $102,000 with the Chromebooks as, well, that's just an old refresh. For our committee, that was new funding and a new initiative. So we actually, they came to us with a baseline figure of more than the 190, well, their placeholder was more than that. The backup that they provided us was 193 too. So that was a disconnect between them, but that was the list that we had the backup for, so we went with that. We did reduce the new initiatives a little bit, because we said, well, this is the first year we're funding your Chromebooks, which is $89,500 of the 102.
Okay.
So it's the bulk of that. So we felt as though we came up with a way that we have, the reduction that we made in that new initiatives, I think it started at 63. We didn't reduce it significantly, but we made a couple of changes, and I am going to sit down with the school department on some of those things that we changed. But that was something that we reduced, because again, we don't want to set a precedent, and we talked a lot about that, about really what's that growth rate, and we decided we really don't want to look at it that way, because their needs are their needs, but we have to be cognizant of that, because that list is growing too.
Right.
And you think everything has to stay somewhat in check.
Right.
So we need to, we want to be reasonable, and we funded them more money than they funded, but we didn't give them everything that they asked for, even in that category.
Yeah, for the benefit of the committee, the middle schoolers, they started a pilot program 3 years ago where sixth graders received Chromebooks, and then every year thereafter, the incoming class received new Chromebooks. So the eighth grade class are now graduating. I think they're still considering what to do with their Chromebooks. They'll be given back to the school department for repurposing, but those Chromebooks are not in great shape. I can tell you, I have an eighth grader and they're not in great shape. High school is bring your own device. So they haven't moved that program up to the high school level at this point. They have excess machines there, if you will, for those that don't have access to their own.
Right.
But it's not an all-encompassing purchasing program.
One of the other reasons for this year, too, is because it's the first year of those machines going through X number of years, is to see what the yield is in terms of 100, how many survive.
It's not very good, I'll tell you that. They're not in
Well,
good
and I
shape.
can tell you, the school committees looked at, and they want to look at the condition of them, see if some of them can be refurbished enough so they can be spares in
Exactly.
case something died, somebody died. And also to have some at the high school, so if somebody at the high school doesn't have their own device, they'll be able to give some. So they're looking at, ways to reuse these. It's just the majority of them are going to be
I think
tired.
an Abacus runs quicker than my daughter's Chromebook right now.
They're getting some of them are getting refurbished along the way. Like, I just had my son send one in
Yeah,
and get one
yeah.
back on the insurance claim. That,
Yeah.
it was not working, and we had to put in a claim. All the parents
Yeah,
are
but they're
asked
hoping,
to
they're just not
provide
going to throw them
insurance.
all away.
Yeah,
or,
they want to
Right.
repurpose
give them all
them.
away. They're going to try and salvage and use and reuse
Right.
as many
We
as
we
they
gave them
can.
a little bit more incentive to see if maybe they
Yeah.
can get a little bit better yield.
Yeah.
than they
Good.
did.
And they did do other initiatives, when Park began. I mean, they got into this, the computer on wheels, the cows, they had iPads on the cows. And now, they're a few years removed from when that got initiated. Now it's a matter of, okay, well, what grades is the equipment appropriate for? So I think that Dr. Gallo had mentioned that maybe the iPads are something that they're looking at for, and don't quote me on this, but I thought it was some of the younger kids. And so they have now, they've had enough different technology where I think they're able to identify what's good for what grade levels. So, so they've got a significant capital funding on technology this year. And additionally, there's also, well, it's not really technology, but they also get the instructional and the maintenance equipment too, which tends to be in total about 50 grand. So, one other thing while we're talking about schools that I would mention is that, and you may or may not be aware that they have an ADA compliance issue with the surfaces at the elementary school playgrounds. So the way that they've got it on this 5-year, if you notice, because I know, just for the purposes of my presentation, I just kind of copied over the totals by department. And I should almost actually, in the future, we might want to do this, because it's kind of nice to have it on one page, and you say, wow, gosh, East is getting almost $89,000. They're getting more than any other school, and it's one of the newest schools. But 51 of that is for the ADA. So what they've got is a program where they're going to do an element, hoping that the state will approve this kind of schedule of doing one of elementary school playground a year. BOS actually brought up, and Mary brought up when we did our presentation earlier this evening, that there may potentially be some CPC funding, but I don't know. I told her it's a resurfacing issue, it's not a new playground. So that may make that a non-starter. But anyway, so that is, so if you look at East, that's a big chunk of theirs right there. Then, it's interesting, we're talking about doing new buildings, but there's a $16,500 request in there on some, controllers and whatnot for their air handlers, I think it is. Well, that's one manufacturer, and the HVAC at East is a different manufacturer. Like, the HVAC stuff is, say, Johnson Controls, and I'm not sure what the manufacturer of the other one is, but they don't integrate. They don't talk to each other, and they've had some issues with it. And then when they have to adjust it, somebody has to go out on the roof. And next thing you know, it happens at the worst times, and maybe there's somebody there alone, and you don't want a custodian going up there for liability purposes. But, those are all issues during construction where, sometimes things don't always. So we have had to replace some items like that. And these are new buildings too. I mean, you know, you guys know if we had, was it the chillers or something, was it last year, where they weren't even that old, they were expensive. And they were just out of warranty, but it was like a 2-year warranty. And here we were replacing them, and they should have lasted, I forget how long, like 15 plus years. And all of a sudden, we're replacing them in such short order. But anyway, so that's a number. Also, we became, the town administrator, Ted, mentioned to us at this BOS presentation that I don't know, it's not really going to affect our bottom line numbers because it's sewer commission, but there was some discussion about them potentially using debt to finance some of their capital, so that from the rate user standpoint, in a year when there's all of a sudden some capital project, since those are all funded by the rate users, if you think about that, you're all of a sudden going to have a blip in the rate. Your sewer rates are going to go up in a year where they do a project, so as a way to level that out. And I think the town, he said, did that maybe 20 years ago, where they'll do a debt issue, and then if at some point in time they have a surplus from their, the net expenses and revenues, they can actually take that, if it's, say, a couple $100,000, and apply it towards that debt. So it's just meant to level out. I don't see any, it's not going to affect our bottom line, but that is something you'll see. I guess they want to meet with us so some way we have to address it in here, but.
As a net impact of zero.
Yeah, so it's not going to impact, don't worry, it's not going to impact that 2081. But it is something that we will have to put on here. We'll tweak our footnotes. Hawk is gone, and then we'll make sure, I know I've talked to Lucy about some of the numbers on Harbor. I think I've quoted those in here because we do have Martin's Lane. I think I might have just referred the reader to the warrant article.
Well, I think when the dust settles on the warrant articles that involve capital expenditures, you need to go back and decide which of those belong in the capital forecast, since we try to show all capital expenditures, even if they're not coming from the levy or mooring.
Right.
Or if they are from mooring or borrowing or the general fund, they should show up as a capital expense. But I don't think we're going to know right away. Maybe a couple of weeks, we'll have a better idea of what's being done from the general fund versus debt versus mooring.
Yeah.
But there will be other things that you may want to put in here.
Yeah, and at the end, we kind of wait and see, once you guys all vote the warrant articles, we'll see how that impacts the footnotes. And then at the very end of the process, what we've done the last couple of years, it's been a really meaningful exercise, is getting a draft of Article 6 before we finalize our report, so that our funding sources are in sync. Because I think there was a few years ago, Lucy, you and I were at a town meeting, and we're like, excess overlay, we don't show that on our budget. And I'm saying, well, somebody at town meeting, if there's a disconnect or they don't see those funding sources matching, we don't want them to, there's nothing, no issue there, but they should, the left hand needs to talk to the right hand. Our funding sources should be in sync with Article 6. So we'll make sure that's the case. But, so I don't know if there's, one other thing on Hawk I just want to mention real quick is, if you look at the warrant article, for anybody new on the committee, if you look at the warrant article last year, there's that section we talk about in our report about where we fund, and we kind of differentiate between feasibility, design work, and construction work. And I would just highlight that, that was the reason really for us that I think that the school department was maybe looking for us to fund Hawk, that design, schematic design through capital. But if you look at that footnote, as a committee, we've really decided that it's at the feasibility stage that it's appropriate for our budget. To do anything more than that is then presuming it's feasible. And that's not our job to do that. It's let the study do what it's supposed to do. And then for something like that, if that design work is going to commit the town to a $2 to $5 million project, that really needs to be a warrant article and see the light of a warrant article and not kind of be buried in our budget. It's not our practice to put design money like that and commit the town to a project that that people haven't had their say in. So anyway, I think this was a little longer than BOS, but you guys asked some questions.
This is good information, Jim.
A couple things. One, I know this is done in other towns. It might have been done here too. So fire and rescue and police and protection, there's a lot of opportunity for grant writing to get money for turnouts, breathing apparatus, ropes, and on the police side, maybe even for the bulletproof
vests. Do you have
vests.
ESP?
I have friends in other fire departments who have done this and been successful. So I'm wondering if that's an opportunity to fund it that way.
absolutely is. And in fact, I actually mentioned at the BOS meeting, and I didn't hear that, if you look at last year's warrant, we had $180,000 expense for those very things, they call them the SCABA units, the self-contained breathing apparatus. And that was 180 grand that's out, it was out like 3 fiscal years from last year, I think it was in maybe 19.
Right.
Well, that came off because we go through every one of the, even the out years with the departments, and they got a grant for that, 180 grand.
Right,
So
so I
we were
see
like,
it-
awesome, check it off.
So I see them
Cross it
listed,
off.
right. So I see the items listed for 2018, for turnout gear for the fire department.
Yes.
And bulletproof vests for the police. So is there an opportunity there for someone to write a grant and get that paid for through that?
Maybe, but I will tell you on the turnout gear, what is it, the Mass Fire Protection Association has put out new standards, and unfortunately, I say unfortunately, they are determining there's much higher cancer risk and exposure for firemen. So the new standard now is every fireman has to have 2 sets of turnout gear. So now we're going to be seeing that on there a little bit more. To what extent there's grants, I'd have to recall. I don't know if either of you remember from the presentation if there were grants on that. But we're going to be seeing more turnout gear because, and furthermore, if it's over 10 years old, what do they call it? A candidate, I guess, for what is it called when they go to fire,
A trainee.
Fire academy.
A fire trainee. It's getting late. But the trainees, they cannot attend with over 10-year-old turnout gear. So that whole issue has grown. So they're really good at getting grants. The harbor master is great at getting grants. Clearly, they got a lot of money on those breathing apparatus, but the turnout gear requirement has increased. So I don't know to what extent there's grant money.
I guess my point is not just for those areas, but is there someone hopefully is exploring the opportunities
Yes.
for any of these capital expenditures, any of these departments, if there's any grant money available on the federal or
Yes.
state level?
Yes.
All right. The other question I have is, and I've asked this before, I know the police like to turn their fleet over X number of years, and they'll tell me it's the wear and tear on the vehicles.
Mhm.
Although we live in a town where I don't see the vehicles doing a lot of high-speed chasing, and, they're usually parked looking for speeders or the occasional drunk driver
Mhm.
passing through. So, the vehicles nowadays and over the years have become more and more well-built, even the engines.
Mhm.
You can idle an engine for a very long time with no damage to the car in any way. So I'm hoping or wondering, when they evaluate these cars, is there an independent person also evaluating the car, and can it go how many, X number of years, as opposed to the policeman is saying, yeah, I like another vehicle, so yeah, this car is run down, I need another vehicle. I mean, I'm hoping there's someone independent who's evaluating these vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, a couple quick things on that. I mean, Lieutenant Norkaitis manages a fleet, and he does a great job. He tells me that I'm pretty sure an engine, an idle hour is equal to like 30 miles on the road. So it definitely adds wear and tear. But he doesn't think it's 30. He said that's what they say it is. He thinks it's less than that. He does a great job managing the fleet and really and we also have a whole new, now we've got all the Fords and the Interceptors. So I'm hoping and think that we might start to see some extension on that a little
The
bit.
lifestyle.
But, we just have to wait. They reevaluate it each year, and they look at engine hours as well as just the mileage. So it's not just, the mileage.
Tim, I think what's real encouraging, we did not even get to that item on the budget before
Yeah.
they came back and said, we have.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
the vehicles are made nowadays, the life is a lot longer than it used to be because of
Yeah.
I
the
think
design.
on
and
the first bunch they've got, they've seen that and they've incorporated it into their plan.
And given you've had 2 skip years, if you will.
Yeah.
In the last, I mean, that's significant. I think that
is.
shows that you're absolutely right, Jim.
And the lieutenant said, we probably, on this 5-year plan you have right now, which it contains 18, he thinks there could be another no-buy, but he didn't want to commit to it. But he said, I wouldn't be surprised if in one of those out years, 21 or 22, there isn't, so.
Last question. Do you see a bubble maybe developing for capital needs in, let's say, 2 years out? Because with the building of these 40B complexes and other things, I'm at least anticipating a greater need of operational expenses for the increase in population and whatever brings with that with those buildings. So there might be, in those years, maybe it's 20 or 21, maybe even 22, where the police or the fire or some other part of even the schools are going to say, based on these build-outs and the increase in possible population, that we're gonna need some more capital than we normally. I know we're at a point, you just stated that we're comfortable at the right
Right.
level, but there might be this sudden little bubble that's created because of these new buildings, and
Right.
that brings us to the next.
Actually, Libby, can I
I
add
mean,
my
the town
question on
has-
top of that? Because it's actually very similar. I think you were right to point out in your remarks the possibility of an operating override and start to think about ways that the town can use resources more wisely to avoid that possibility. Specifically on the capital side, to the extent that there is a bubble coming up, there's been dialogue in town lately about perhaps going to a 10-year plan rather than a 5-year plan, and putting in place maybe a more robust maintenance plan for capital assets. And personally, I wonder whether that couldn't be paired with a kind of professional facilities maintenance staff, like the school department has started to do in the past couple of years. Have you thought about that as ways that might be effective to work out the effects of any bubble that might be coming down the pike?
Let me first answer on this issue. I think the town has tried to leverage these new developments with capital. So you see in the Avalon project,
we've got
the
another
$1 million for the Quint.
Right.
You see with the $1 million from the potential Alliance project, which I'm in a butter to, so I don't want to say anything about that. But if it isn't approved by ZBA, the town doesn't get their $1 million. Well, that they slated to the Plymouth River windows, because apparently I think those students are in the Plymouth River school zone. So I think the town is considering the correlation between those developments and the capital needs of the town. So to what extent we're going to see a bubble in that, I don't know. I mean, the school department, we just funded $45,000 is in this plan for a 10-year master study for 10 years. It was originally 90, and they cut it in half because they now have Doug Foley and have their own facility manager, and they've already prepared a lot of that information in-house. So I think that will partially address where the needs are with the schools, and Plymouth River will be one of those, and but obviously I think we all know Foster is going to be the big target. And Eric, you are preaching to the choir when you talk about that issue, because we've been saying for years with capital that that we really need to look at this. I don't want to say longer, because the whole 10-year idea, I don't know about that. I mean, you guys know, it starts to get more and more vague as you get into the out years. So I don't know if a 10-year plan solves that. I think the 5-year plan is sufficient, but I will just for a second here, I was given this. I didn't acquire it, but the school department has their asset inventory and operation. This is what Doug prepared. And I think as part of that, as you guys know, Capital originally in his first year contributed some money towards it because we were looking for a deliverable. And I guess our deliverable is tabs. There's a couple tabs. It's Town Hall and it's the library. So our deliverable bought us tabs 7 and 8. So this is what we got. But we've asked for, something like this. Now, I don't know, is it a full-time person that needs to do it? I don't know, but, it's got pictures of the facility and the components, and then the pages, and it's a little bit different than maybe I literally, from one of my first years in Capital, or first 2 years, well, that was over 5 years ago, had kind of laid out something with looking at the subsystems and their when were they installed, their age. So, we would love to see something like this. And we were kind of jealous when we saw the one that they got. So, but we got a couple tabs on it though, so we didn't get totally left out. But, so I don't know about the 10-year plan, but certainly something like this, and that's why I kind of mentioned in my presentation about with those added assets is the need to track them and to monitor them. That's what that summary is. You monitor those systems and you update them and you see where they are. So we'll see. I don't think there's been a will to that's an argument we've been trying to make and it's not been received. So I think if the desire at the highest levels of the town is to not do that, or that we don't need that, I mean, that's what I've been told, is that they don't think we need that.
I do think it's interesting, when Ted presented to the board and to us recently, he highlighted some of the more significant capital projects that are out there. Now, it's not captured on a schedule, if you will.
Have it on a
But at least it's a list with
I
some.
have it on a schedule, if you'd like to see it.
Right, so you do have it, so at
Yeah.
least that's captured, because I think it's important for the town to see.
Yes.
You know, down the road, the significance of many of these capital projects that we are gonna come up against.
You're gonna be continuing. Once you
Yeah.
get done with one bubble, you're gonna have another bubble.
Exactly.
So I really see, just to kind of wrap up that discussion, that, I mean, I don't know that anything more than a 5-year buys us any more than we need, but I think that two things. One, we've talked a lot about sort of what are the projects on the horizon, so I've already seen some of that information and tried to put it in a format that I'm going to show the committee and say, we've talked about this in the past, about having one of our sections be, upcoming projects, but I have to say we ran into a little bit of resistance from department heads, because one time we had, like with the fire project, we had a number in here. And then they start saying, oh my God, that's committing us to that number. No. So, all it is it's a number. And so, I kind of put a spreadsheet together that we may want to include, and there's, at the bottom, is a disclaimer. These are purely for, projections and estimates. But, I mean, at some point you have to put something on paper, and we're not committing anybody to those numbers, but those are, it's an estimate for a reason.
Right.
So, we've talked about doing that, and then, ultimately down the road, if something like this is developed, then I think that may be more appropriate for I would think you should do with this is, then ultimately, if you have some of the, like a spreadsheet like that for each building with its subsystem, then that plays out for fiscal year, and then you get a summary where it's different from, it overlaps with what we do now, but it's in a more organized way. Instead of, we get, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, the boilers, like we had the boilers in the library for a long time. Like, it's much more reactive, and why we've tried to incorporate more into our 5-year and into the warrant is because, we want to be proactive. We don't want another situation where, because that was a lot of people's argument. With the middle school, was that things, they felt like, they felt like maybe proactive measures weren't taken, and then the result was, by not doing some of those repairs, we had a larger problem ahead of us, so.
Any other questions? I want to wrap this up. We have other business as well to do here.
Two comments, Jim?
Yes.
One, I think you mentioned it, Libby, but the department heads needs to be thanked as well.
Absolutely.
They are very cooperative. They come with the right spirit. We saw, we talked at length about the police, but the other departments also, so I want them to hear that.
Great.
Yes.
But most importantly, before Libby leaves, unless we can convince her otherwise, this is her last year as
Come on.
capital chair.
7 years, I don't know.
So you notice I'm leaving the door open.
They said Ronnie Curvin was here earlier. I said, oh my God, I started on Capitol, and remember I served his unexpired term, and I was like, I didn't see him. I don't know if he was here.
He was here for
So
a
that's
while.
why it's an odd number of years, because of Ronnie's.
But we're still not giving up totally, but in case that happens, I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the committee for all you do,
Yes.
and the amount of work and
welcome.
clearly the thought that goes into it, so thank you.
Yes,
very much.
thanks for
Hopefully
everything you do.
Hopefully we've given Capitol the place that it deserves, and not just be a placeholder on the other big budget.
Well said.
But anyway.
Great, well, thanks again,
Thanks,
Libby.
Libby.
Thanks, Libby. Appreciate it. And Craig and Eric, thank you very much for your hard work in that, because I know this is very consuming and detail-oriented, so, again, thank you.
Our
very
pleasure.
much.
Absolutely. We don't know what we'll do with ourselves.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you're going to hear something soon. You'll have to be busy. Okay, Tom, we skipped over Article CC, South Shore Country Club Golf Cart. We wanted to get Libby out of here as soon as possible. So, Tom, if you could just introduce that article?
Yes. Article CC, will the town raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purchase of golf carts and utility vehicles for the South Shore Country Club, or act on anything thereto? And my comment, it reads, the South Shore Country Club, or commonly known as the Club, is requesting to borrow $283,756 to purchase 70 new club car golf carts, which are a total $209,301, and 10 John Deere utility maintenance vehicles for $74,455 to replace aging vehicles that have exceeded their useful life. The fleet purchase will be financed through town debt, which will be repaid from club operating revenues in 5 annual payments commencing in the fiscal year 2018. In November of 2016, a change in the allowed use of bond premiums and how they are to be treated came into effect under the Municipal Modernization Act. This act permits the town to lower the project's borrowing cost through the application of any bond premium received. Approval of this article requires 2/3 vote at town meeting. The Board of Selectmen voted 3-0 and unanimously in support of this article.
Any questions for Tom? Yes.
Tom, what happens to the old equipment, carts and the old tractors? What happens to them?
I believe it's a trade-in. They do get an allowance, and that's already included.
We don't want to leave one for Jim Taylor, because I've seen his driving habits. He'd be safe for
I know, one of my dreams is to own one for my back 40. But actually, most of them are not in good shape, so the company or the vendor that they deal with will actually reuse them, and they'll repurpose them for other clubs.
And some of the utility vehicles, Jim, I know that this country club was offered what they felt was too low of a turn-in value, so they've offered them to, I think the DPW is taking two of them.
So they'll be put in use just enough.
They'll be put in
capacity in another department.
Yes.
All right. Second question is, I'm trusting the golf course, the country club would pay these back, but we've had the occasion where they have an off year because of bad weather, and they've come to us, the town, for money to fill that gap, which they will pay back, or they have paid back. What happens in the case then where they have a bad year, they don't have the revenue they expected, they're coming to the town, part to borrow because it's cheaper to borrow through us than finance it themselves, but they can't make the payment to us because they're coming to us for money to fill the gap, the operating gap that they've incurred. What happens then?
Well, the way I can explain it is these revenues are earned and or received and put aside so that that payment can be made. So that if there is some problem in the spring, the money's already put aside for that loan, and it's one payment made to Gene Montgomery. Am I correct? Yeah.
Okay.
And these are cash cots too, Jim. This is one of their biggest money makers, and I think they've said that they're going to raise the rates for them.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we see in a reserve fund transfer is usually a bad spring season.
Right.
Where they run out of money, or in previous years, they would set aside money for their own capital improvements and do them in the fall, and now they're holding off doing that, and they also have a golf tournament fundraiser. So they're trying to offset that.
I have just a couple of questions on the recommended motion. I think that we should add the section, whether it's 721 or 44B, in the first paragraph under General Laws, Chapter 44, isn't there a section, and I guess I could go to Victor on this one, the borrowing language, not related to the MMA, but on the fourth line of the first paragraph?
The second paragraph?
First paragraph. The language that allows us to borrow based on the town treasurer and the selectmen, I thought there should be Chapter 44, section something. I'm just not sure what it is. Do you see where I am?
Chapter 44 would encompass all the sections within Chapter 44.
Okay, but in other borrowing language we've had in the
Yeah.
past, we've included, I mean, you don't have to do it here. I'm just wondering if we need to find out what that is.
Okay, I'll make a note.
And also, I think we should say that in the third line, to meet said appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen. That's the standard language we usually use.
I'm sorry, what is that again?
On the third line of the first
Yeah.
paragraph,
Meet said appropriate, the
the
town.
town treasurer. I just looked through a couple of our prior borrowing articles, and it looked like that was the way we'd phrased it, but I just want to make sure that we have, if there is a section that's appropriate in that line, that we include it.
It probably is.
I think Jean can probably tell you that.
Yeah.
That's all. Sorry.
Great. Would you like to make a recommendation, Tom?
Yes, given with the corrections, that the town appropriate the sum of $283,756 plus borrowing costs for the purchase of golf carts and utility vehicles for the South Shore Country Club. To meet said appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, maybe Section 20, not, or any other enabling authority, upon such terms as the town treasurer and Board of Selectmen shall determine. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay for such costs by like amount.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great, thank you, Tom.
I'd like to thank, let's see, Lucy, Jim, bond counsel, Jean Montgomery, and a few other people for allowing me to write about 5 words of this.
Well, you did a nice job, Tom. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to the reserve fund transfer request that we have. Oh, great, okay. So this is a request for, you have it in your binder. It's for $8,850, and it's for the anticipated and expected hire of the Assistance Benefit Administrator. Now, as you may recall, as part of the insurance renegotiation, there's a high need, and an agreement was effectively made to have this position, and that person will be effectively helping the transition from Mayflower to the GIC. A lot of paperwork, a lot of coordination needed to effectively manage that. If you recall, this person will be working 20 hours per week. It's already been, this position has been posted. We have 30-plus applications. It's been whittled down. They haven't made a final hire yet, but there's some very qualified people that are interested in this position. They'll be starting in March, and the paperwork and the transition begins in April. So they'll be training for a couple weeks and then be ready to go with the conversion of a lot of people. Yeah, so again, now we'll be considering, if you recall, that position was an additional request that we'll be considering, and I don't want to influence the committee, but I would believe that we'll find that to be a very high priority to fund. So with that being said, are there any questions about this reserve fund transfer request? Jim?
This might be an additional fund, but it better happen, otherwise this GIC insurance is not going to work well for them, and Sue's going to be a very angry person.
So
that's the one additional request that better come true.
It's a cheap, I'll invest.
One who works in this type of business,
Yeah.
it better come true, or she's going to come at you with every knife and fork and she can find.
I will invest $8,800 to get $1 million return any day of the week. So with any other questions or with that being said, will somebody please make a motion?
I make a motion, we accept and do the transfer of $8,850 to pay for the part-time salary for the position as noted.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed, thank you. Victor recused himself, so it's not an abstention. Right. Okay, let me just sign this quickly. So just to give you a heads up on potential other reserve fund transfer this year, which we'll be working on, and that will be one of the last articles that we consider. You know, we've had some significant snow over the last few weeks. Snow and ice budget is over at this point. So you can see why Ted requested another $50,000 in the budget, is that we're now over our allotted budget. So you can anticipate some additional snow and ice expense, among some other, hopefully, minor things. I won't give you a number, but there will be an additional reserve fund transfer request needed at the end of the year. Okay, now let's, I'm gonna skip liaison updates. I'll come back, because I want to give you a heads up on a kind of a breaking story here, which is gonna significantly impact our calendar. And that is that, drum roll please. For the benefit of the camera, thank you. The school committee, pending the highly likely approval by the school committee on February 27th, will be requesting, well, we will be submitting a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in connection with a feasibility study to either renovate or rebuild Foster. Along with that will come a warrant article for our consideration. So the selectmen will be opening up the warrant and submitting a new warrant article. The feasibility study funding request will be for $700,000, and it will be for our consideration. So again, this is literally breaking news as of today. And so the tentative schedule right now is that we'll be hearing that article first in a joint session with the selectmen on the 28th. So that's why I was couching the vote date with the two warrant articles that we were hearing this evening. So as you know, now the reason for this timing is that there's been some additional significant mechanical issues at Foster with their systems. And if they don't do it now, the window for a submission of a statement of interest is April 7th. So if they don't do it now, they've got to wait effectively a whole nother year before they get into the process. And as you know, going into the process to potential building, it's a significant time period, 4 years, let's call it. And so they felt that it was the right time to do it. And I think that that's why you probably saw the withdrawal of Hawk, because they would really want to put 100% of their attention towards what they believe is the #1 priority for the school facilities, which is Foster.
How do they fund the $700,000?
So the $700,000 would be funded out of fund balance. So what we'll be doing between now and the time when we all consider this is that we'll be looking very carefully at fund balance and doing some projections, if you will, about fund balance and what the impact would potentially be on all these things. So we're going to have a fairly good cash flow analysis for you, because there'll be some, when we talked about those one-time building fees that are coming into the town, so there'll be some additions to fund balance, and certainly the warrant contemplates some outflows from fund balance. $50,000 for the architectural study here. Harbor, we're considering some options for that one, so we'll talk about that further, not tonight, but as things develop, because I think there's an interest in not having fund balance hit for some of the harbor expense that we can, and look at other alternative ways to potentially fund those things. But we're going to come up with as detailed of analysis as we can provide to everybody for consideration of the impact to fund balance of something like this.
Jim, you mentioned an April 9th date?
April 7th is there. So the way it works is that they submit a statement of interest, but then following it, they expect, there's a cost to actually produce a feasibility. So this is, they're saying, yeah, we're going to go into your queue, and then there's a lot of steps thereafter. And one of them is a town meeting approval for funding for feasibility.
That doesn't have to happen before?
No.
Okay.
And then feasibility, and then there's all these steps along, once they get invited into the program, that they will need to follow. But it is a 3-4, it's a lengthy process, and certainly, they'll be presenting options, a potential renovation of the existing facility, potential rebuild. And the other kind of wild card here is that we don't know if that location that they're at is going to be impacted by floodplain issues. So there'll be an analysis of, if it needs to be rebuilt, can it be rebuilt there? And if it's not able to be rebuilt, a new one put there, I highly doubt the MSBA would fund a renovation there either, knowing that it's impacted by potential floodplain issues. So that's going to be part of that feasibility, is looking at what would be, are they in the floodplain zone? I think we'll know that fairly quickly. And if so, where else can they potentially go?
So in the way of process on this, Jim, you said the 28th is a joint hearing with us and the selectmen. Will we hold our own hearing at some point?
Yeah, so my plan is to, and I wanted to talk to you about that, make sure you're comfortable. So we'd have
Back on the floodplain, they may not be able to, what I have heard is they may not be able to build on the same footprint, but it could be, just because
same
it's
location.
flood, it could be on the site, it just may not be able to be, which again negates any renovation, but it depends on where the siting of the building is, so it's not like they may have to move it completely to a different.
But they may have to move it completely.
But they may, yes,
we don't know
but
that yet.
they're hoping that it's just an issue of reciting it on the land. But again, we don't know.
We don't know. So our process is going to be, is that we will hear it in a joint session with the selectmen on the 28th. I would imagine that I would love to get some of the more straightforward votes done that evening too, because I think our hearing will probably last an hour and a half or so with the school. And we'll have some time to get rid of some of not the major ones. I want to give like leashing, selectmen, more airtime. Even maybe town hall, but I don't sense that town hall has a lot of proponents that need to be here. We may be able to vote that one that night, but I certainly want to give leashing and selectmen a different night for voting.
So we would meet after the joint?
Yeah, so we would meet
upstairs?
with the selectmen for the joint, and then head back upstairs and get some business done. The business, I feel, is fairly straightforward and routine. And then we would certainly have our own hearing with the school, so we have the ability to really interface, interact, and ask our questions that we'll have, and then we'll vote it on a separate night from that. So really, we'll dedicate, or at least we'll have, not dedicate, but we'll have 3 opportunities to hear it, discuss it, and then ultimately vote it. Now, the good news is that we had some fluff built in. I had the TBD date, which was March 2nd. Now, I got lucky. I did not have anything in mind for that date. Eric called me out on it and said, what's TBD mean? And I had nothing planned at all for that night. It just so happens that we'll probably move the bulk of the 28th to the 2nd. But I didn't want to kind of propose that until I get everyone's buy-in on that. And I'm glad I had a placeholder for that date. Now, the hearing that we'll have, honestly, we may need to meet 3 times in a week. We may need to have a Wednesday session to have a separate hearing just for that item. I'll let you know, and I hope that's not going to impose too much of an issue for folks. What we've also done is we're moving, we were going to hear the school budget review from the subcommittee on the 28th, and that's going to be moved back a week. They would like more time and to continue to work on that budget. So I hope to have a new calendar out to you all in the next, tomorrow may be overly aggressive, but I will certainly have it out to you by Monday and Tuesday of the following week so you can make your plans. But certainly planned, we'll certainly have a meeting on the 28th, Tuesday the 28th, Thursday the 2nd. The following week, we may have to meet 3 times, but I'll let you know.
So is there any chance that our schedule will go into the week of the 13th, or is that even a possibility?
It is a possibility. I'm looking to avoid that because that's the week that we get all the articles in order. And, but there is a slight possibility.
Sure.
I'm hoping to avoid it, though.
You should send some gifts to our spouses Up to us.
I will leave that up to each and every one of you individually to handle your spouses.
That's what I did with the bag. That's what we were supposed to do with it.
Exactly. Yeah, you didn't have to eat that candy, Jim. You could have just turned right around and given it to your wife.
You obviously don't know my wife's taste. That wasn't gonna make anything happen.
Well, that's up to you, yes.
You want to tell who's taking the lead on it?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So, you know, consistent with the assignments, I felt it very appropriate. Linda will be taking the lead with Dan and Dave's assistants as they're the education subcommittees. So they'll be working on this article. And Donna.
We don't see enough of each other.
And Donna, you know, Donna's all, you can see what she has to deal with on these minutes, so I felt that it wasn't really appropriate to give her another responsibility.
Thank you to my ACES buddies.
Yeah, so, so that's late-breaking news that's gonna impact our deliberation. Just when we thought we kinda had it all.
Maybe we could sell the property of the Foster School, buy another piece, and sell the property there to another 40B project.
You never know, Jim, but you know what, we'll be off this committee, so we won't
That's
have to
right.
worry about that.
Hingham Mitchell will be a great site for a new school.
I know.
Bear Cove Park. Just kidding. It's a joke. It's
Yeah.
a joke.
So any questions on that, any concerns? How would folks feel about taking a vote up? Is there any, so what I'm thinking is February 28th, joint meeting, we go upstairs and we vote.
Is that televised?
No, our vote would not be televised. Certainly the joint meeting will be. We hear and vote, building department revolving fund, disposal of surplus supplies, this is the 28th.
With the letters?
We vote reports from committees. We hear and vote those two. We vote reports from committees. And how are people feeling about voting town hall architectural engineering that night? It doesn't feel like there's a significant amount of public interest in that article. We'll hold off voting the others, Bear Cove Park, changes to Selectmen, the harbor articles.
What happened
will
to
be
the
voted
planning?
second.
What happened to the planning?
Planning they're scheduled to be heard on March 7th.
Okay.
I'm hoping not to have to impact that evening at this point. We have library grant, which I was planning on hearing and voting, since we've already heard that once on March 7th as well. Report of Personnel Board, I'll probably move to the 28th. So I'm thinking that I'm thinking that we'll need to meet on March, geez. How much time would you all like? Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking the time that you would like between the time we hear the school, we meet with the school, and the time we vote. I guess it's based on what comes out of that hearing, right? All right, let me throw it out there. How would folks feel about if we met the night of the 28th for a joint session, and then have them come back the next evening for our one-on-one discussion with the school committee?
Is it a Wednesday?
That's a Wednesday.
2/29, oh, no, 3/1.
3/1, March
Sorry.
1st. Would people have significant issues with that?
The very next night.
The very next night.
Have our hearing.
That would be good. Would that work for folks?
I'm not here that whole week, as you know, so.
But I would imagine that, that hearing I would dedicate that meeting to the hearing alone, that hearing alone. I don't think we would do any other business.
I can't do the 29th.
You couldn't do the?
I teach on Wednesday nights
you
until the
do?
middle of March, you know, but.
Okay.
29th. Is it
First.
first?
The first.
Okay, so here's another idea. How about the following
Roman
Monday?
That's a quick turnaround for the comment.
How about the following Monday, which is March 6th for a meeting? Monday, March 6th.
Unless the planning board decides to use that as their
Which is
backup date.
always a potential,
and
right?
Some of us won't be here.
Anyone else would have to miss Monday, March 6th? If we were to go to that route?
Yeah, that.
I mean,
Well,
we-
and that
we-
would just be better for getting the
Right, the work done.
comment.
Yeah.
The school committee is talking about plopping an extra meeting in. They wouldn't do that on the 6th, would they?
I don't know.
They were talking about the fact that there was a gap between the 27th and.
Yeah, they were to, but that was before all this came up too, so, yeah, but they were thinking, because they would want to maybe look at their budget.
So let me ask you another question then. How about if we were to meet, I don't know if this is possible, we need to figure this out, the week of March 13th, which is that following week? How do people look from an availability perspective? That would allow us to keep Tuesdays, Thursdays for the most part.
Oh, you mean it would be after the
Yeah,
hard
so
drop
what
dead
I may
deadline?
do is push everything back a week and squeeze in a hearing and a vote a Tuesday and a Thursday of one of those weeks.
We could vote on St. Patrick's Day, that would be great.
The warrant's due on
That's-
May 17th.
Well,
That's
You know, that
after
means
our
I'm gonna have to be
deadline,
up
right?
well,
writing all this
Well, that's
stuff.
what we need to coordinate first beforehand.
Yeah.
So we need, that's why I'm trying to ignore it. Well, you know, it doesn't go to the printer until the 24th.
Also, it would just be that one, because, yeah, our
You're
deadline
saying
is
meetings
the
on the
9th. but-
14th
Yeah.
and the 16th?
That's
I'm just wondering people's availability if we need to
Yeah,
go that
yeah,
way.
that'd work.
Okay.
The 13th?
Okay.
16th.
Or
Yeah,
even,
for
or
each
even
one.
just maybe the 14th. Maybe we just need one more night to squeeze in.
I
Kristen?
wouldn't be available the 16th, but the 14th.
Okay.
You can't do the 16th either.
So maybe what we can do is just try to push it back one day, which is a Tuesday, maybe have a Tuesday meeting, the 16th. And
14th.
I'm sorry, the 14th, excuse me. And just push everything back kind of a day to squeeze in an extra normal Tuesday, Thursday meeting schedule for us. Okay?
So the
I'll do the best I can.
22nd.
So, what I ask everyone,
7th to 9th.
when you receive my updated calendar, which again is going to be in the next couple of days, hopefully, or maybe by Monday at the latest, let me know if you see any significant issues, because I've been known to I've been known to miss things. I try to be as careful as possible, but let me know right away if you see anything that doesn't look right. And then secondly, please reach out if there's a vote to the proponents of the articles that are involved. I'm going to try to move as few things as possible, but if there are things moved, please let your liaison folks know, especially about the votes. I'm thinking about the folks that we've heard from about their votes. I want to make sure that
So
they know.
my only remaining warrant article is the reserve fund transfer.
We're going to do that
That would be,
we're going to do that the very last night, because we're hoping that we don't have to do a supplement. We don't want to do a supplement with that, so we'll do the best we can. It may be a supplemental issue.
maybe we could do things like an all-nighter, like state and federal senates do, and do them in the dead of the night.
Jim,
Nobody's aware of it.
you filibuster already, so.
Do the filibuster, Jim?
No, Jim already does, so we're
But you
good.
pass them
Read
through the
from phone
nighttime,
book.
that way nobody notices during the day.
All right, I want to get out of here before 11.
The March 2nd, then the night for the decision on the Board of Selectmen and dogs? Is that what you're?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Probably, most likely, yes. That's what I'm thinking right now. I know that Katie will be back by then, and
Yeah.
we'll let her know what's going on. All right, any other liaison items or questions? So that's big news, obviously, and it's going to impact us, and it's a fun one. Any other questions? Yes, Bob?
Late breaking news, I learned from Bill Reardon before he left that the selectmen voted 2-1 to oppose leashing.
Okay.
To oppose?
To oppose leashing.
So they didn't change their votes?
They did not change their votes. Their votes remained the same.
Okay.
And they apparently approved the 2 harbor articles unanimously.
Great. Yeah, we're working on funding of that, so by the time we take it up, we'll have a better sense of
So they
funding.
have voted
To keep the leash law as it is.
to
the
recommend,
leash law in
to
place.
recommend no
You're
action.
voting no action.
Okay.
So having to have dogs leashed will be continuing.
That's their vote.
Correct.
Any other, thank you, that's very helpful. Any other questions? Any other liaison updates? Matters not anticipated?
Actually, I make a motion that we adjourn at an early night tonight.
Thank you. I will gladly accept a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hey, thanks, everybody, very much. Thank you, Jim.